too, so I'll sit here.
Perfect.
Our
Yes.
elbows don't
Anytime I
knock.
go to a restaurant, I'm like, oh, I gotta be in the end. So I'm bumping everybody.
Good morning, sir.
Morning, how are you? I just washed my hands. No way. Yeah.
All three of our names and phone numbers are on the card. We have a team card,
Oh,
so you only have one card. Cell phones and everything else you might need to get in touch with us. And you can always reach one of us.
all right, it's 10 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started, team.
Oh, you want me to just go?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Do you want us to?
I don't know if you do a roll call or anything first. I was waiting.
They're all here.
Okay.
Yeah, we're all here.
Well, thank you for having us. I brought our team with me today. We have Dr. Bill Vogel and Mr. John Reichert. Dr. Vogel's a former superintendent in Florida. If you're not familiar, he served as superintendent in 2 districts. But more important for this search, he worked in your school district for more than 20 years. So he's very familiar with the Osceola community. And then Mr. John Reichert is a retired director of HR and district standards from Seminole County. And so he's our HR perspective, Bill's our school superintendent perspective, and I'm the school board perspective. So together we do the search. The purpose of today's pre-search agenda is for us, the 3 of us specifically, to hear from the board's perspectives on some of the strengths and some of the challenges that the new superintendent is going to be facing for a number of reasons. One, so we can try to help find some good candidates that might have specialized whatever it is you're looking for, but also so that when we have people who might be interested ask us questions, we can have a real full and robust picture of what's going on here in your district. So it's really a conversation that we're going to have, and we're going to kind of work through these items. I do try to monitor our time because we want to take a little over an hour maybe, and then Bill and John have some additional things we want to talk about, including getting started with some input, and John's going to need some direction to develop a timeline. We need to know kind of what's your desired start date for the new superintendent. Do you want some overlap? Some of the things that we talked about last time. So we will just jump in and get started, if that's okay, and we'll start by looking at your district guiding principles, vision, mission, and beliefs. So the question that we really have around the vision, mission, and beliefs is to what degree the vision, mission, and beliefs are embedded in school sites and in the community, if at all. You know, how much awareness is it, how much focus is on it, that sort of thing. So what are your thoughts on the vision, mission, and beliefs with regard to stakeholders? John, you have an opinion? It looks like you're waiting for someone else to go first.
Well, we kind of have 2 mission statements, but I believe that our mission has pretty much just been a PR thing, and that's just my view on education, having not that much experience in the education world. So normally you have some kind of mission, and then you drive towards that mission, but in the end, ours is kind of vague, and it doesn't really, you'll never know if you got there or not. And certainly, no matter how many strategic goals we make, we're not going to achieve our mission. So I think that education in general is in a big moment of transition.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, Osceola County is no exception. So I'm okay with starting from scratch with something that the district and the community can not only be behind, but could actually realize.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Slightly disagree. With every strategic plan, it's always moving, and for me, it's a living, breathing document, and
I don't think that everybody in the organization top down understands it and lives it every single day, because, I mean, the further away you get from the folks that created the strategic plan, the less connected you're going to be with it. However, even as board members, when we're looking at every single one of our agenda items, we see how they're connected to our strategic plan. So I do believe that they are important, and that we're at least trying to make them a part of the everyday conversation. I do think that, as with most organizations, and this is probably a point of something that the next superintendent does need to know, is how do you bring that top-down vision down to everyone so that they fully understand and embrace where the district is going. So that's the one note that I would have, but I do think that, at least from where I'm standing, and I'm not standing everywhere, which is an important thing to know, I do see it embedded into everything that we do. So slightly disagree from my fellow board member, however, there is, of course, room for improvement.
Other thoughts?
I do think our mission exactly is inspiring all learners to reach their highest potential as responsible, productive citizens. And I know it did change a couple of years ago to tweak that verbiage a little bit. I don't remember exactly what it was. Dana, can you share on that?
Read it again.
Inspiring all learners to reach their highest potential as responsible, productive citizens.
A couple years ago, what we added this year was future-ready students to the vision statement and the focus of our strategic plan.
So I think, as a school district, that is exactly what you want. You want to inspire your learners to reach their fullest potential. If we want to tweak it, I'm open to saying how can we better, hone in on what exactly we want to say. But I think as a broad statement, which a mission usually is rather broad, I think it fits with what we'd want to.
And you came from the school site before you were here.
I've been on the schools, and I've been on the district side as well.
Do you feel like the schools and the district staff know that mission and vision?
I know it's stated at every single board meeting that we have.
Okay.
It's listed across different things. We have it even on our badges, I believe.
Okay.
So I think it's embedded within our district. Whether or not everybody could say it off the cuff, I don't.
Yeah. Okay.
know that that's a thing.
I jump in because I'm the freshest member on the board. I just left teaching in November here for the district to say, so boots on the ground, to say it that way. I think that at the school level, we're focused on students. That's when we walk in the building, it's about our students. There's a vision statement, and of course the actions there. I think that for me, the strategic plan needs to be fluid in the sense where you're getting that input from the boots on the ground, and it's flowing up to the top and back and forth and gets changed often. And so keeping that connection to what's happening in the schools is vital to whatever plan we're moving forward. And I think that engagement piece is huge. And our organization is so large, so you're going to have differing opinions for everything. But I believe not just the statement, are we living it, and getting that input often is very important, because it drives everything. So, okay.
Yeah, and being a little more specific, because our strategic plan kind of has been working on that a little bit, because to me it's the mission first, then the vision. The mission technically should be like, what are we tasked with? We're tasked with graduating students based on 3 different areas. And we've actually discussed this a little bit last time. I think Dr. Pace presented during our strategic plan, was that number one is we want like a basic literal competency. So when they graduate, they know how to read, write, do arithmetic, but also include like the arts, and not just reading and writing only, but just having a whole student that's capable of having a foundation in basic literacy skills. And then number 2 is, are they workforce ready? Because we have a lot of CTE programs, because at the end of the day, if they can read and write, great. But if they don't know how to write an email in a professional manner, or how to reply all caps, lately, those are like little details, but these are things that we need to kind of get kids ready for in the workforce too. And now that we have, all digital, we have, everybody has some kind of form of technology at their hands. that kind of like using that as a way to get them workforce ready too, and the soft skills, not so much the hard skills. Like if you're gonna be a plumber, yeah, you need the skill to know how to open up a toilet, but then you also need to know how to send an email to a client and say, hey, by the way, I fixed it, or here was the problem, you know what I mean? So those are the soft skills that use the literacy as a component. Now, the last thing is productive citizens, you know, getting people to respect authority. You know, we talked, and I actually spoke with the parent on the way here, we talked about, oh, is the uniform policy really important? You know, the physical uniforms, you know, do kids, they really dress inappropriately? It's not just that, it's getting them prepared. When they go to school, it means something. You put on that uniform, you come to school like you're ready to work. It's like your job in a way. So to me, it's like creating a culture where people take school seriously and they put things in order to get that done. So kind of being a productive citizen, knowing that they're part of a team. So to me, those are the domains, like a literacy competency, workforce ready, and like productive citizens. And we do have some of that already embedded in our strategic plan, but maybe the mission statement can be more specific to reflect that. And the vision is like, how do you achieve it? You know what I mean? Hey, everyone has a chance to be our mission, whatever. So to me, like the flowery language is more the vision statement. The mission statement needs to be more specific. This is what we want.
Tactical.
We want to graduate students that are, you know, that are, have basic literacy, that are workforce ready, and are productive citizens for tomorrow. That can be the mission statement. The vision statement is, hey, we believe everyone can do it. You know, do we, do we arm people with the resources to make sure they happen? You know what I mean? So that part we can kind of relook at.
So what have been the big accomplishments, recent accomplishments that came through the strategic plan? What have been the big achievements that have already been achieved and or are real close to being achieved?
Wait,
I think
Terry.
community engagement, I'm actually looking, I don't know if this helps the team to actually look at the plan and the goals so that we can like relate to that. I think community engagement is one of the things where we definitely shine. Although some folks may have different opinions of what community engagement means, but I can just tell you from when I started with the board to today, I think that we do a really good job of spreading messages. Most schools are getting, have the same messaging, so if the district shares something, they follow suit to make sure that that information gets shared out to.
So the consistency of the message has
Consistency,
improved.
there's a, not that I want to, I mean, you know, folks may disagree. I come from the corporate world, so I'm going to say brand value. I think that's definitely like, we have a cohesive brand, like we know who the district is. And I think that's been a really good, we've done a really good job of that. I mean, fiscal responsibility, I guess, some folks may agree or disagree, but I do know that we know where the money is. We can see it. We can talk about whether or not we're spending that in the way that all board members or all community members feel that is the best way to do it, but we have the information. It's available to everyone who wants to have it. And I also appreciate that we do have consistent updates on that information. Again, whether or not people think that we're on the right track or not, when it comes to evaluating, improving the process, I think that we're doing a really good job with that. When it comes to implementing our outreach for the renewal of the quarterly sales tax, yes, we did that, so that's a definitely check on that. Establishing local vendor education campaign, I think that we've already started doing that. I think that we've actually changed some of our processes to include more local vendors. Equitable distribution of money, including time, money, and personnel. I don't, maybe that one's up for discussion. And I would say specifically with personnel, but that's my opinion. I don't know what other folks think. So I think we've done a decent job with that. I will stop here and have other people add their opinions.
Yeah, I believe that since I've been on the board twice, you know, and one thing that I've noticed that's a little bit better this time go around, speaking from a neutral perspective, is that each one of the high schools now have like more of a specialization, where they have CTE programs. Like for instance, Osceola High School has the aviation program. St. Cloud has like an auto program. And I thought that was something that we really wanted to do because, ideally you would like everyone to have an auto program, but it's expensive. So what you do is you try to overload one to make it really good. And now that we have choice programs, so if somebody really wants to be a mechanic, they can go from one school to another and use that as a justification for moving. We just don't like doing that for sports because that gets them to trickies. They want the best football players. We don't want all the all-star players stacking up to one, but we do want all-star mechanics wanting to go to one school, or all-star aviation going to Osceola High School, or, veterinary programs in Harmony High School. So, again, it's the fact that I can name you different unique programs. Now, there's some programs that are consistent throughout, like we have digital design, because it's so much easier just to throw a computer and put it in every classroom. But the veterinary program, again, you got to have maybe some animals and some specialized teachers and training. So I think that the high schools are learning that it's not always college-bound. It's preparing kids to have some kind of skill set for them to be prepared to join the workforce right away or go to our tech center, which is OTech, to get some specialized vocational training to get them a little bit closer to a finish line.
See, that's really good information for us, because that's the kind of thing that people will say, tell us about their schools and things, and that's something that not all districts can say. Each school kind of has a area that they've been focusing on.
Yes, and that's been real key. And we've been, I've been kind of speaking back and forth to the superintendent to kind of modify that even more, but we're getting a bit better on that. As far as the communication, I do agree that we're doing more efforts to outreach. The only problem that we have with the communication, it's one-way communication, not the second way. So we've been creating a lot of committees lately, but we don't really solicit their input. Even tonight at the board meeting, I'm gonna mention it already, we have a school safety committee that was created after my SRO task force. Well, tonight, we're modifying the Code of Student Conduct, but the committee wasn't given the revision to look at first. So it's like, wait a second, so we have these committees, but now the second part of it is to actually solicit their input. Because a lot of times we have a very top-down approach where this is what we're gonna do, and we're not very good at receiving it the other way around. I think that the district has to be better, or the new superintendent has to be able to capture the input of the stakeholders and sometimes adjust fire from there. Because even Erica was mentioning, and you mentioned that the strategic plan is a goal, but sometimes it has to have a little wiggle room. And if there's wiggle room and there's stakeholders saying that they want something, we have to say, okay, is what they're asking reasonable? Because people can just ask for anything. We can't adjust, all the time. But if somebody has a reasonable request or a way to improve a process, that we have to take our people seriously. Because if we do want people to get parentally involved, or community stakeholders, we have to really listen to them. And we have to show them that we made an adjustment because of something that you said. It's not just the dog and pony show of, okay, check the box, we had a meeting, okay, meeting, goodbye. It's like, they have an opportunity to change something that the district does, a process, something tangible. They can go back and say, hey, our committee did this. Because when you do that, now you're gonna get more buy-in. Now you're gonna get more sponsors. When you talk about the collective purpose of a superintendent is to get these external stakeholders invested in the school district. That's how you do that, by honestly reaching out to them, changing some potential processes because of that input, and then they're gonna wanna do more.
John, you had a question?
I just want to jump back to some of those programs or special programs in your high schools. Are they also placed at those high schools to kind of attract a higher enrollment? Or so enrollment is part of it?
Yeah, we're a huge choice district, and what that means for our district is that we have programs everywhere to, have them come to the district schools, right? So
Sounds like
we're
a
huge on,
competition.
it is, yeah.
Our schools have been
A healthy competition.
really taught how to market themselves, because it is competitive out there. You're competing against other schools in your district that are public schools in your district because of these programs, but you're competing against the charter schools and the private schools, and now homeschooling has become such a large thing after COVID. So, I think our schools have really learned how to market themselves, their programs, things like that. So yes, they've honed in and they figured out a way to really offer something of value to a student. I'm going to have 3 kids in high school next year because I have a son in high school now and twin girls coming up. And I might have kids at 3 different high schools because each of them can find their specific, interest. And so I think that is something that has really helped our district with meeting kids' needs.
Say one thing too, as far as academic achievement. I know we talk a lot about the workforce ready. we can't forget about, so I'm elementary background, so the COVID, even though that is changing, did a detrimental thing to our students, that, especially the early literacy, and to have, talking about students, and we need to be engaged throughout from birth, whether that's community engagement, getting the folks in the neighborhoods to come to programs that we can do, which we have awesome ones like Central Avenue and things like that, that we do to outreach to families, to keep that literacy moving forward, because there was such a gap and equity with what families could do and couldn't do during those time periods, and you saw some falling back with math, with reading, with all of those types of things, and it's real and it's there, and it affected every student. Even I have a high schooler who's graduating, and she's the last COVID class, and with mental health and other things like that, it's real and it's there. Even with the most support and the families, we have to talk about that time period did something to our students.
Well, and I was going to say that with our strategic plan as a whole. I mean, I think prior to COVID, we were really charging forward when it came to meeting our strategic plan goals and outlines and things like that. I think, yes, things are off kilter now. I don't think we can exactly look at our strategic plan and say we're meeting everything right now, because we've had to deal with so many.
And that's not unique to you all.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that question is a little harder to look at the strategic plan and say, are we actually hitting these goals? I don't think we probably are right now, but like you said.
And it may require the fluidity of changing because of that, because there's new priorities that came out of that.
And the
You were
ripple's still
approaching an A grade, I know.
Yeah,
Now-
SDOC good to great, you know, that was our.
Absolutely, but now I believe you're still a B rated?
I think we have, yeah.
You're
I
still,
don't know what we're still, yeah.
you're still B rated? And that's, there are a lot of districts that even slip further than that. So at least you still have that platform, and I think that's something that's gonna be attractive to anybody applying, because you're still a high-performing district despite COVID, even though.
Which typically would suggest you had some pretty good processes in place prior. I mean, that's really what that would indicate. Not without certainly a refocus on some new structures, the mental health, the literacy. I'm real concerned about students and their math from COVID.
Absolutely. And the ripple is less, but it's still there.
Yeah, for sure.
The other thing that kind of ties into what I heard is, Neo City. Now, you're really marketing, and you have a number of students going to that.
My son attends that school.
Okay, and that was 600 or 700 kids going to that school or something? Okay, well, tell us about that, because that also is a career focus, but it's also academic as far as the kids going on to college.
I think that's one of the best things
Go
that our
ahead.
district offers is, we have OXA, that's our art
Yeah.
school. When we can offer those very niche,
Yeah.
very focused, programs for our students, it really, and because the whole school then, is around this same type of focus. That was one of my favorite things about attending OXA graduations was that, you see that it's embedded within the school, that love of arts in education. And then I think that's the same thing that is taking place at Neo City, because the whole school is embedded around this whole STEM initiative, and that we have that direct connect to UCF and things like that, and our different partners in the community that are tied into technology and all of that. The opportunities that opens. I want to do more of that at our schools for sure.
And the art school is one of the highest performing schools in the state, and
Yes.
recognized nationally, I believe.
Yes. So that's what I wanted to add, if I may. It's, Neo City's amazing. It's an amazing school, but every single one of our high schools has a niche, or several. So, for example, OHS has their, they have culinary, they have aviation, they also have business. So, and we also try to partner with outside stakeholders in order to help create these programs. So OHS is, what's the program there, the business program?
3D.
It's different, 3DE, which is with, So it's, the next superintendent needs to understand that this district, I haven't worked in any other district, but we're very focused on ensuring that we provide so many opportunities, and every school has something to be proud of. Not Neo City, of course, OXA, yes, but CHS, OHS, they all have their niche programs that make them unique, and those programs are also part of the community as well.
And there's performing arts, it's not my part of the district, but it's very well known, like PAFA, I think, like
Yeah.
that's your district, like they do the arts there too in elementary, so they're starting that pathway in
The
elementary.
feeder program.
Yes,
Feeder
yes,
program.
yes.
Great.
Now, one of the challenges, because obviously we can talk about all the great things all day too, but one of the trends that's kind of happening, I think that the new superintendent will have to be, I'm hoping, because you can only hope, is the amount of growth. I mean, we're literally building like 4 schools right now at the same exact time as we speak, on top of everything else. So, and that's just what's currently on the pike. We still have other schools to get built. And one of the things that I'm trying to be working on lately is the interlocal agreement with the local counties and the cities to try to manage some of that growth. Because right now, they just focus on just student stations. We're not showing them the whole picture. We're not saying this is the number of teacher vacancies that we have. This is the number of, I think Seminole County, someone showed me that they have a good interlocal agreement. Because even though concurrency doesn't exist at the state, but we have to get something where we kind of like, there has to be a better coordination there. Because for us, because we're always kind of catching up. It's like, okay, the county's approving every development, and we're caught with, okay, now we got to build 4 schools, we got to build portables. And
Would it be fair to say that potentially, and as we continue to get input and develop the qualifications and qualities, that maybe one of the preferred qualifications might include has managed large growth or has worked in a district with growth, because with the amount of growth you're talking about, that may be one of the really important things that you look for in a new superintendent. Tell us about some of the other challenges that this new person's going to face.
So I don't know how helpful, just from thinking of my hiring experience, some of this information might be, right? Like that we've discussed so far. Just because when you're coming into a positive, like if you're the new coach for the Super Bowl winning football team, there's a whole bunch of pluses. And if you are a professional at that level, chances are you're going to know how to use those tools to your advantage. The problem is your weaknesses. And really, I think that this county has overcomplicated things slightly, because our job, in my opinion, is to deliver the highest quality education that we can in the most transparent manner, if we were just to simplify what the task here is. And in those respects, we are not achieving that, because we may be a B, we're 1 point away from a C, but we are near the bottom of the list in most of the metrics that the state puts out. That's a problem. We have a very similar budget to Seminole County, very similar number of students, but we're way behind them in performance. Our graduation rate right now was obviously which just came out, is below the state average. We have a lot of problems in delivering education, and we have a lot of problems in being transparent with the community. And those are 2 challenges that the superintendent should come in here. If he wants my confidence, those are the 2 things that he's
Or she.
really... Yeah, if they want my confidence, then they're going to want to address those 2 things, because those are the 2 things that are important to me. In terms of communication in an organization of this size, communication is great if you have a great positive message. But if you're communicating a great positive message at the expense of addressing the issues that are not so positive, then it's really just a waste of taxpayer money. So for me, I think that the number 1 task is he needs to come in here and start delivering the highest quality education that we can deliver. And then he needs to be more transparent, because there are questions in this community regarding the transparency of the district, and he needs to address those. And if he can do those 2 things, then I think that he would be very successful here, or she.
Talent management, which I know is an issue for every district,
That's a great
but that does not mean that we can't tackle it. And I do want to give, shout outs to the current administration for, doing the best they can. They've worked with, creative ways to bring folks to the district, but that is, if we don't have qualified teachers in every classroom, that's going to become an issue to even get to what Mr. Arguello is saying. How do we get to the next level? How do we get to an A when we don't have the qualified staff to do that? So that, I would love to see a plan
from our next superintendent on how they're going to tackle talent management.
And retention.
Yeah.
To get those folks here, how are we keeping them here? How are they wanting to stay in Osceola and our district at the schools?
And reinvigorate district staff, in my opinion, because the county has grown tremendously, right? But you were here for, decades, so obviously this has grown. And in my opinion, we should have the way to make, if just to go back to the sports analogy, if you want the best passing offense, then you get the best wide receivers and you get the best quarterback, right? So I think that we need to do that at this district. It's large enough that we should be recruiting for the very best personnel at their jobs, not just because someone is local. And I mean, and that's just coming from the private sector where you hire the best that you can find, not the things of loyalty. And I think that that's an issue at this district.
Besides growth, what are some emerging issues that you're starting to see coming up through the schools that you're going to have to manage?
Well, discipline.
Discipline?
Yeah, even Sheriff Ivey had to sit there with hold hand in hand with the chairman and say, hey, we're gonna start, holding kids accountable and start punishing them and stuff like that. That's a big issue. If you talk about teacher retention too, these kids they know the code of student conduct. They're like hitting the boundary on each one before they get to the next level of offense and taking advantage of that system. And some teachers feel like we're not supporting them because they know the game and we're not, helping them in that respect. And quite frankly, a lot of them are cursing and they're being disrespectful in that classroom. Teachers are like, I'm not making enough money for this, forget that, and they're leaving. So dealing with overall courtesy, decorum in the classroom, and professionalism is something that we're gonna have to address.
I would say being at the vanguard of educational philosophy, instead of holding on to the past in terms of delivering education, it should be somebody who's very creative and innovative and who's not afraid to try some new ideas. It would be great if Osceola was leading education, not trailing at the end of the list.
To go along with the behavior and other things and creativity, not forgetting the piece of the parental involvement. It is so important that the family is part of this process, and maybe they didn't have a good educational experience to know how to parent their kids, not saying, but that needs to translate, not just at school we act this way or at home we act this way. It has to be fluid, and keeping those families engaged and involved in the process as well. And not just put it on staff to take care of things. It has to be, when you're dealing with a child, you're dealing with the whole child. And so everybody comes to school different, and you have to be able to meet them where they're at in order to move forward, so.
I would say dealing or working with a transient community. We, one of the fastest growing counties in the country, in the state. And so with that, it brings a lot of transient folks into our county. And so how do you establish a relationship with parents and with students when they're coming in the middle of the year? And that happens very often. And also a population of students who are mostly coming from disadvantaged homes. And that means that their family is engaging with education in a different way.
Anybody else want to mention some emerging issues? Let's then talk about relationships, areas to continue, areas to strengthen with your congressional delegation.
Well, if I can lead on that, I guess congressional delegation is also your senators. But I know SOTA's been really responsive to some of the needs that we have, and we've gotten a couple of grants from him. I went up there a couple of times for safety and security and gotten that squared away.
Do you only have one rep for all of Osceola
Yes.
County? Okay.
One for all of us.
That helps.
It's not split.
Yeah, that helps.
So
For now.
Yeah, so
Right.
he even attended our graduation ceremonies.
Good.
So
He's a
and-
graduate of your schools, isn't he?
No, he
think
came
so.
from Jersey.
No?
But his wife, Amanda, she works at the school district as well.
Oh, okay.
So he knows like the ins and outs. So he's been very responsive. Not the senators. Trying to get hold of him, that's another story, you know. So they've been not as accessible as the congressman.
Are you guys, do you have a good relationship with any of their aides or staff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, well, I can't speak for everyone else, but I have a working
Like as a
relationship. so-
district, I think
Yeah.
we do, yeah.
As a district, yeah.
But I can't remember them attending or doing anything. I mean, that's just my perspective. I don't know. Maybe you guys have seen the senators come down and do something, but I haven't really seen them pull weight like the congressman. The congressman will actually, fight for some bills up there, help us get appropriations and things like that. I'm pretty sure the Senate has to say yes, because it's not just Congress doesn't pass it.
Right.
But as far as like taking the lead, coming down and asking us, hey, what do we want? What do we need? I mean, Soto even comes to our board meetings and testifies and said it at that last board meeting. If there's anything you want, I'll be more happy to help you the second go around. So I haven't seen that level of initiative come from the senators.
Well, and that's a stronger relationship with the representative than some districts have, for sure.
Right.
Other thoughts about congressional?
That means we have to keep it though.
Right. What about legislative? State legislative?
I mean, as a district, I think they're invited to events at schools. I know that we used to have the breakfast with the juniors, and depending on the board member, they would be invited to those as well. I think that we do have a relationship I'm talking about as a district, I'm not talking about as an individual
Right.
board member.
Right.
I think that we do have a strong relationship. We need to keep that. That's especially important in these interesting times that we have in Tallahassee. So I think the next superintendent needs to be aware that that is a huge part of their job.
Now, you're working on your legislative platform maybe today? So do you present that to your delegation? How does that process work?
Couple ways. So I think somehow we all have some kind of relationship with whoever represents us. That's on each board member. But as a district, we do go to the legislative updates meeting every year, and that's where we present our legislative priorities. And this year, we're also going to Tallahassee as well, meeting with them individually. Well, I don't know if it's individual. I think that they're all going to be in the same room, but we're also going to meet with them at that point.
Now, one thing I would like, because we do have a pretty good relationship with our legislators, State Senator Torres and our couple representatives, Fred Hawkins is on the Education Foundation. But one thing I would like to see the district get more specific, because I think we have a tendency to be very general and say, we want to help hold teachers accountable. We want to help, things that other districts are fighting. But I think as a school district, we should be able to challenge our legislators and say, hey, look, we want to expand a specific program, because we have more minorities than anywhere else. We have over 60% of our population is of minority designation. So when you talk about grants and special, monies that can come to the district to do like pilot programs to testings, we should be the testing hub of the Florida, because even Orange County may have more Hispanics than us, but not a percentage. You know what I'm saying? So anytime a legislator has an idea and say, ooh, I have an idea, let's improve math scores of 8th grade learners of disability backgrounds. We have that. We have anything that you have like a problem with the demographic of like trying to study, we have it in our district. So I think that it's incumbent upon us though to be more specific in what we're asking the legislature to do and challenge them to be able to use us more often in that and bring specific dollars to our county, not just general support stuff. You know what I mean? And that general stuff, support stuff is important. But at the end of the day, we should be fighting for Osceola County specifically to get something because we do have unique demographics. And that's something but that's not really our legislature's fault. They're just doing what we tell them to do or advocating on what we believe. But I think that we could get more specific in our ask and be able to garner more resources for the district.
I would agree with that, and I would also add, there's a time to get as much as you can, based on strategy. Like, we're going to be strategic with this. We know we can get this. This is easy. There's also times when you can be more aggressive. And
I think it's probably what you're saying, but I'm gonna say it in a different way. The advocacy for our students, I think that we need to be, I would like to see a superintendent that's more involved in that advocacy part of it, and be a little bit more aggressive with the asks, not just, we can get this, we're gonna do this. It has to be more, this is what we need in Osceola County, and we're going to ask for this very thing, which, I think I've evolved in this, but I would like to see more asks that are, I think maybe the way you said it is correct, specific to our demographic, not just as general as it can be, because it's easier.
I mean, I think in terms of the ask, the way that we do it might not be so bad. Provide a list and send it to the delegation. We're not going to find another superintendent that has a better relationship with our legislators, especially our local legislators in Dr. Pace. So, I mean, it doesn't matter how you ask. Nobody's going to have that relationship with them like that. And I think that really falls on us. We're elected. We should be advocating on our behalf, and maybe we should be spending more time. The superintendent is the CEO of the district, and they should be managing the district. I think that advocacy in that respect should really be handled at a school board level.
You know what? I agree with that. I changed my point. You're right.
Anybody else want to say anything about the legislative delegation? All right, what's the relationship with the county government, Osceola County, not the municipalities, not the cities, but the county itself, county commission, county government?
I think individually, everybody has a complicated or some form of relationship with the county government. But as an institution, they do not have a great relationship in terms of the way that they treat one another. They may have had a partnership in the past for a very long time that's cooperative, but in the end, the school district is getting the lower end of return on every transaction with the county district, especially when it comes to the tax that we just passed, the tax extension that we just passed.
Yeah, can I add one thing? We have a very good relationship at a staff level.
You have, I'm sorry, what kind?
Staff has a very good working relationship with, but we have bumps in the road, obviously, on planning and development. Okay? My observation has been there's not a lot of cohesive relationship between this board as a board and that board.
And kind of like piggybacking on what Mr. Aguero was saying, it is a relationship, but I feel like it's a very top-down relationship. Like, they look at us as like, hey, this is what we want to participate. So when they want to participate, they're willing to do that. You know, do they invest in education? Yes. But I don't feel, at least from my perspective, they've ever solicited my input. You know, it's kind of like what we do at communication. Yeah, communication is great with parents, but we don't really solicit their feedback. You know, we did an interlocal agreement with the sales tax, and they refused to sit down and have an interlocal meeting. You know, so we're having an interlocal agreement where we all signed saying this is what we agreed to, and we never even sat at the table. And we even extended that offer and said that at the board meeting, let's have an interlocal meeting.
We didn't extend the offer, we requested.
No, we requested it. Yeah, it wasn't like maybe come. We had a board meeting, we voted, and they refused to show up. So, because they want to do what they want to do, and when it aligns with our agenda, then we work together well. So I almost feel like we're getting used, you know, because when we go to the state of the county meetings, man, half the meeting is talking about education. You see that slideshow, oh, we love our kids, we gave money to this, we gave money to that. And so there's obviously a relationship there. But I don't feel like what you said, it was with the boards. I don't think I've ever had the county come to me and say, hey, this is how we want to work together. Let's modify the interlocal agreement. Let's have substantive talks. Like, we only want to talk about superficial things that look pretty, but when it comes to talking about the impact fees, things like that, you know, they don't really want to hear or at least my opinion. They may hear somebody else's opinion, but they don't want to hear mine. And I have plenty of opinions. People know that. I'm not shy when it comes to talking, but no, they don't want to hear my opinion, so.
I have a question. Do you share the infrastructure tax with the county, or do you have your own half cent?
No, we share it with them.
But you also have your own, don't you?
No.
Yeah, there's both.
You have both? You have both?
Two.
Oh, you have both of
County,
them?
That's the districts, the boards.
Okay.
Since 2016, and then we share a
Okay,
part of our
got it.
money
Got it.
with the county and the other two city governments.
A percent, not a penny.
Percent of that, okay. That's what you're talking about there.
A quarter of,
Yeah, the percentage that got renewed for the next 20 years.
But at least you have your own half cent.
correct.
Without that, it would be,
No, go ahead. It actually rolls into what
Go
we're
ahead.
doing next here.
Oh, okay, I'm moving on down, yeah?
If you're moving down, that's.
Anything else? Like, what about with the cities? Good relationships with the cities and the schools?
So we only have two. We have Kissimmee and St. Cloud, and so now I'm in the St. Cloud area and now sit on the St. Cloud Chamber boards. They're engaged, and you have to stay on top of that as an elected official to work with the other elected there. But as far as staff goes, to Mr. Krumpenbucker's point, it seems like it's pretty seamless with whatever we need. So in the different city areas to get things done at the school level. I know that there's a charter school that is run through the city of Kissimmee, and so you might be able to speak a little more to that. But that's a tremendous relationship that they have to keep that school thriving there, and it's fully run, I believe, through the city of Kissimmee.
The city runs it completely.
So they tend to want a quality education in the community. So that's wonderful.
Well, I think going back, like listening to the struggles that we're talking about with the county is, I think that goes back to us as individual board members too, and that whole advocacy piece. Like, I think we have to be there to build those relationships with those county commissioners, city commissioners, things like that, in order to have a working relationship with them that will benefit the district.
I think it has to do more with intention, because no one's going to have a better relationship with those county elected officials than Clarence Decker had. And certainly Clarence Decker could have and probably did meet with them, and there was a different intention than at least what we discussed up here on the dais prior to that. So, I mean, we're not going to find a superintendent that has better relationships than what exists or more access. I mean, essentially,
I
our
think you
county
build
still has
that
people that were
relationship.
raised together. It's,
Right.
I
Right.
mean, it goes deep. It's not like.
I do get that. So let's talk about chambers, economic development, those sorts of groups. I know you have multiple of them given your different communities, but in general, the relationship between the board and these entities. Let's hear about that.
So they do offer a seat for the school district board member to have a part of the St. Cloud Chamber in Kissimmee, Osceola, Greater Osceola Chamber. It's going to take me a while to start saying that. So yes, they do offer us a seat at the table to attend and be as engaged as we can be. So that in itself, just having that access and seeing that that's a piece of the community is important. So, and then one of the newest board members, so I'm going to let our veteran board members talk a little bit more about what has happened and what you could see improve, or what a superintendent can help with.
I mean, I think that the bridge is there and that the seat at the table exists. And I mean, the opportunities are there for us to take them. We also have to hold ourselves accountable for that piece as well. We do serve on committees, so I think everyone here serves on some kind of committee. I think you're in a few. So we have to develop that relationship. But the opportunities for us to do that do exist.
Okay.
Yeah, and I echo that too, because even Dr. Pace has argued that the Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce has been pretty active. Because it's been like, within themselves, they've been loosely structured, they've been alive, but they're not really active. In the past couple of years, they've gotten more membership and more involved in events. And so when Dr. Pace saw that, she joined the chamber as well. So, because we weren't going to join a chamber that wasn't very active, I mean, just for the sake of joining it.
Well, there's time,
Yeah.
there's a finite amount of time, energy, and effort, right?
So we saw them being active with recruitment and going to events, so we decided, hey, let's go to that. And to Terry's point as well, we have to kind of set up an agenda for that, because to be honest with you, and I'll be one to admit it, I'll take my own self-blame, I kind of go there, but nobody's ever spoken to me before and say, hey, how can we use the chamber to achieve our strategic goal? Am I recruiting a business to sponsor a school? I would love the district to say, hey, Osceola High School needs another sponsor to sponsor their, airport program. Well, let me go there with the purpose, not just attend, but try to recruit a business, you know what I'm saying? So that's incumbent upon the board taking that initiative and being proactive and say, how do we
So
leverage
the
that
opportunities
resources
are
to
there, but
benefit
the
education?
intentionality.
But the relationships are there. If I asked for something, they probably would. You know, I guarantee you, if I went to the chamber and they go, you know what, that's a great idea. Let me try to find a way to make it happen, but we never asked.
Okay. Anything else about chambers? What about economic development? Same sort of relationship? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, how about relationship with your faith-based community groups and your other community partners? I mean, typically we find in certain communities, certain partnerships that are just unique to your community that we would need to be aware of. What do we have here that?
I speak on that because I did some work in the school district as well in the Oasis program, and I have to tell that too. We have a strong Oasis program with volunteers. Now COVID kind of set some of that aside with being on campus during that time, but we have faith-based partnerships that are with the different schools, whether they're coming in helping teaching manners during cafeteria time, or whether
that's
they're
kinda
help
cool.
sponsoring Teacher Appreciation Week or things like that at the school level. Being a part of the SAC is huge at the different individual school levels, but our faith-based partners, they can get engaged if they want to, and our department, I believe, does a strong job with that piece too. Limited amount of staff that they have doing that, so that's, yeah.
Okay. What else? Faith-based other community partners.
I mean, this is just anecdotal information, but maybe others have other examples. I know that I've worked with Mercy Foundation, which is a foundation that I am a member of, and they've asked to partner with the school districts in certain things, bring more awareness about our choice programs and all of that stuff, and every time I've asked, there is a strong partnership there. So the willingness to bring in community partners is there, and that's definitely something that we don't want to lose with our next superintendent. Even though we're a growing community, we still kind of feel like a small town, and I think folks like that. So, yeah.
And that's where I think our committee assignments can do that, you know, and I hate to bring up the past.
Board-level committee
Board-level
assignments,
committees,
okay.
correct. Like, we have like the Business Advisory Board, for instance, and Mr. Bass was a part of it before and he got reappointed, and I thought, man, what a wonderful opportunity that would have been to incorporate somebody else. Maybe ask somebody from the Mercy Foundation, hey, why don't you participate in our schools? You know, so that kind of goes hand in hand, where we need to start being strategic about our decisions, you know, and saying, okay, you know, do we have enough participation? Like, we have the Puerto Rican Chamber, but is any of their members a part of any of our boards? Because they're parents too.
Sure.
You know what I mean? They may have somebody with an ESC need, you know, they may have special needs. And so they could probably participate in that. So I think we have to be a little bit more strategic and aligning people up with a purpose, not just meeting for the sake of meeting. But I think that when we talk about community outreach, faith-based, they can be concerned about student discipline. So if we have a student discipline committee, maybe have somebody there represented, you know, and kind of aligning those resources. So when I look at a superintendent, I'm looking for a leader that knows how to not just come up with a strategic plan, but to align those resources accordingly to make sure that it's being executed.
Do you on an annual basis have a list of committee assignments when you, so all of you, and you, at your first
Yeah.
board meeting, and you decide who's going to represent the board on each of those?
But what is missing from that is that we don't report back to each other.
Yes,
And that is
yes.
our fault. That is 100% the board's fault that we don't do that. So that's,
Observation.
Yeah, what did
Yeah.
they do? What did they accomplish that year? What are their goals? Like a mini strategic plan within that committee itself.
So if you're the liaison, you truly liaise and share the information
Yes.
back.
Kind of thinking of ways of, if you've got that structure, how you can enhance that structure.
it was embedded into our board meetings before,
Yeah.
something to think about as a team.
Anything else related to faith-based or other community partners? All right, let's move to your internal relationships. Administrative staff. Talk to me about the relationship with your administrative staff. And that would be district as well as school.
Us specifically, or how we envision the superintendent?
The board, the current situation,
Yeah.
and what improvements you're going to be looking for.
I have a great relationship with admin. And I'm saying that, you know, because I know that other folks may not have that, but that's because I feel comfortable with going to admin staff. I feel comfortable asking them questions. I trust them. So I know that there's room for improvement, because if one board member doesn't feel like they can do that, then that means that we have room for improvement. And if folks feel that way, then they should talk about it. But I trust the staff. I feel like they have great expertise. I don't know everything. I can't. So I'll ask a lot of questions, and I put myself in those vulnerable positions to ask questions and look like a not so smart person before the board meeting, so that I'm not, asking or like trying to figure stuff out. But that was an individual choice that I made. I think that needs to be the case for everyone, so that we can perform at a higher level as a board. So there's room for improvement there.
Okay. I can say as a new person coming in, I've had complete access to anyone that I've been. I think I've met, not with every leadership team member quite yet, but majority of them, and spent at least an hour or two with them over the past few months, asking tough questions, to be honest, and they've been very open and very, sometimes, wow, that hasn't been asked before, or things like that, because it's important for me to lay the foundation that I need the most accurate information that I can get when I'm trying to make the decisions that I am, so that I can move on to the next decision, because there's so much of the school district business to push forward that we have to push forward whatever decision I can make and get as much information as I can. And that's just huge for me, and I've had no problem getting any of that. And so it is what I put into it is what I get out of it too. So when I do come to the meetings, I feel as prepared as possible, but I still want the input to hear to make that informed decision. So, okay. That
I
answers.
agree, I've had the same experience.
Right. Being me, I'm always going to give a straightforward answer, because I like to be positive and negative. One positive that staff is they are accessible. Anytime I've tried to get access to somebody or getting a report or something like that, I've always been able to get a hold of them. That's not an issue. And we're talking about admin. We're not talking about teachers. Let me just
Not yet. We
talk
will
to-
in a minute.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear
Correct,
that
admin.
we're talking the same language. So the issue that I would love for admin to kind of have as a different philosophy is the word accountability or evaluation doesn't automatically get a negative connotation. There was even a contract at the school board where we were evaluating some kind of software program, and in that software program's language, it said you're not allowed to use this as a diagnostic tool or an evaluative tool. And they're like, and they come in, well, we don't want to be evaluated or something like that. I was like, wait a second, I'm not talking, evaluation doesn't always mean negative, like with negative consequences. But at the same time, people can't be afraid of the word audit. We don't even use the word audit anymore. We do like evaluations of schools. They used to call them fidelity checks or fidelity audits. Now we gave it like this new fluffy term to no, that's, because to me, that's where the leadership comes into play. Like, if you do an evaluation and the first time you find something, it's almost the evaluator's fault or somebody higher, because they didn't maybe communicate those expectations or show them what to do. You know what I mean? Now, if you give them a new plan of attack and they repeat the same mistake, then it's like, but we can't be afraid to hold people accountable. You know what I mean? And I think that's something that I think that the new superintendent has to be able to impress upon the administrative staff is don't be afraid to use the word evaluation. Don't be afraid to use the word accountability. Don't be afraid to use the word audits. Check things. It's like, because we're a professional organization, like you trust but verify. Now, I believe Dr. Vogel may get the job done, but every now and then we have to double check to make sure that he is getting the job done. And Dr. Vogel shouldn't take that personal and say, oh, Melendez is out to get me. No, it's an evaluative instrument, and it's a way, it's a internal control to make sure that, because when the strategic plan doesn't get accomplished, I can't blame Dr. Vogel. At the same time, there has to be controls in place to make sure that things are happening. And I believe that we're quick to default to an internal control as being a negative thing, as being a controlling thing. And I think that the leadership has to sit there and let them know that, hey, these supports are not there to punish you, because, maybe you have a legit reason why you couldn't do it. You're like, hey, I got 10,000 things on my plate, and you're giving me the 11th thing. And then that's where that honest collaboration comes into play and say, okay, maybe we have to adjust your workload. So maybe that's the issue. But you'll never get to the root cause if you don't have those control measures in place and have those difficult conversations. So we definitely need a superintendent who's willing to communicate those things, but not always from a punitive perspective. it's from a perspective of learning
Improvement.
and
It's an-
improvement,
Got it.
absolutely.
John, you have some thoughts you want to share on this one?
I mean, I completely agree with that. I think that for a almost $2 billion organization that's catering to 70,000 students, this is too down-homey of a culture, right? And at some point, you have to go from semi-sophisticated to sophisticated organization. And so you need that level of leadership because otherwise it creates more problems than it resolves. So for me, it's not really personal. I think that everyone is accessible. I mean, I have my own opinions on whether things are transparent or so on, but in the end, it's not about accessibility, right? I mean, this is about performance. So when you look at our human resources issues, we have human resources issues that should not exist in an organization this size. You learn that when you're taking a business class in freshman year of college. So, but these problems don't get fixed, you know? They just get kind of, it's like litter box treatment where it just gets covered up and covered up and covered up and covered up. Not, let's say, not for any malicious reasons, but just by leaving it, right? If you don't address an issue, then it becomes a fester problem. So there's a very careful balance that needs to be made. You have institutional knowledge, which you have to care for, right? You have opportunity for talent, opportunity cost regarding talent, and you have a goal, and right? So you have to combine those things very carefully. You keep the institutional knowledge where that's the most important aspect of that maybe job. But what we've done in Osceola County, and it's not to disparage anyone who works here, but in the end, we were elected to do a specific job, and it should be okay for the person who's responsible to say something, to say it. When it's not, that is already an indicator of a problem, right? And so we need to hire the best people at the job. There has to be somebody out there who is an absolute superstar regarding HR. And the district should be trying to find that person and put them in there. And that is going to resolve a problem, or so you hope, right? As long as they can perform in that situation. And then you go through each, thing, and you're like, this person has too much institutional knowledge. We cannot afford to lose that. So you keep that piece in there. And you're building a team for a purpose. Here, it's like you're just fighting to preserve what is there. And I'm just not a fan of that, So I would like the superintendent that's going to come in here and say, this is the best team that I can develop to achieve the goal that you have. And of course, that's speculation on their part, but that's okay. What I would not be in support of is to say what comes first is personal relationships. And that's to me is detrimental, not just to the district, to the delivery of education, but it's very counter to what our purpose is and why we exist. So I'm looking for someone to come in here and say, this is the best team that I can develop, and we understand what our purpose is, and that purpose is to deliver the best education that we possibly can. And we are actually achieving your mission, which is we're going to create all these situations where your students are achieving their potential. And we can say that now. There's no metric that allows us to say that,
What's the relationship with the teaching staff? You want to go back to admin?
I do, I actually, because Mr. Arguello brings something up to, so, if y'all are familiar with organizations, right, there's like 4 levels of the organization. I don't know what the first one is, but we have storming, norming, performing. This district is norming. Good job, we're good, right? But we have a lot of institutional knowledge, which is what I wanted to bring up. What I think is important for us to go to performing, to get to that A, to get to that, this is the bomb district that everybody wants to come to, is the systems. Because a lot of the issues that folks are bringing up that we're familiar with, they weren't done with bad intent. It's because we have institutional knowledge. This person is telling this person how to do this one thing, but is that a system that can be replicated if X person is taken out of the equation? So I think one of the things that's really important
for everything, but specifically here at the district offices, is to build those systems.
Codifying
that will
things, yeah.
Codify things that will, doesn't matter who's doing it, we're going to be able to get to that performing level.
It's forming, storming.
Forming's the first one,
Yeah,
no, we're
yeah.
way past that, we're good. We
It's
just have to get to
Tuckman's
that
stages
next
of team
level.
development.
Forming, there we go.
Mr. Tuckman, yes. All right, teaching staff. What's the relationship with the teaching staff? I heard a ooh.
Ooh, Lordy, that's one of the biggest deficiencies we have right now.
Yeah.
Biggest deficiency.
Deficiency,
Yeah, deficiency, yeah.
not
Yeah.
efficiency.
No.
Actually, that'd be great, thank you. Thank you. So tell me, what is creating that?
I think it's, without going,
No, we're looking at just overall, and it's not specific to one year, but in general, the relationship.
just lack of respect. Lack of respect and honest dialogue.
Both ways?
Yes.
Both ways?
No, not really both ways. It's more sort of the administration towards them. And then also lack of, like what I call it, like a car salesman trick, because I'm a real estate broker by trade, right? And technically, you don't offer your best offer first. You kind of do it your lowest, and try to see if you can meet somewhere in the middle. And I think that's like an old school mentality. We shouldn't on purpose.
So you're talking about specifically negotiations?
Yeah,
now.
negotiate just in general, because now we're talking about, it cannot be this one, it could be just in general. We always seem to default to, hey, let's bottom door it, and if we get a bargain deal, great, And to me, that's almost disrespectful too, especially knowing that you're capable of doing a little bit more. You can even change the thought process, do your highest and best at the very beginning, or do something a little bit better. But I just feel like we're completely disrespecting them, and they're.
But that's specifically with regard to negotiations, is what I'm hearing you say?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not just
I think
negotiation.
It's also in terms of promotions. I think that's what they're, if you listen to what they say, then they feel like they are in an environment which is not very fair. So, I mean, that's their complaint. They feel disrespected in so many respects, like every other educator in the country right now. Just you feel disrespected by being in a classroom with kids. But at the
The
same
general
time, yeah,
community,
generally.
yeah, right.
But our district has a very tense relationship with its teaching body right now, and they have cause to complain. So, and I would say that I agree. I think that's kind of an outdated mode of communicating, bargaining, right? I mean, it should be a more collaborative. There's no reason for that to be an adversarial process. I'm sure Frank hates me saying that, but no, I'm kidding. So it's just there should be a way and a process, and they should be part of the strategic goal. Should also be part of a strategic relationship with the teachers, and they need to understand the process, and they don't. They come to me with all kinds of instances of so and so got promoted, they didn't have the certification, and even though that's anecdotal, they have this impression that things are not fair.
And here's another thing too, being very specific. They feel like there's a wall. I feel like teachers over there, we're over here. Whenever we have workshops and things like that, district staff always gives us updates, but we never have a teacher there. We don't actually have a teachers as part of that workshop to let us know, hey, this is what's going on. And so it's like they have to yell at us to get our attention, or they have to do something unique, as opposed to being at the table. So every time we have workshops related to the academics, at one point we talked about testing, right? There's too much testing. What testing should we filter? They weren't at the table. I didn't think about it. That's true. Our teachers weren't even at the workshop to say, they were there, but they were in the background. That's my point. We created an invisible wall. They got to sit in the audience and had to go, hey, Miss Moody, do you have anything to say? But Miss Moody wasn't invited to the table on a workshop talking about how many tests are too much. And so to me, that's part of the disrespect factor too. If you truly want a collaborative environment, they need a seat at the table itself. And the same thing with the superintendent search committee. If we decide to have a community, body to help filter it, no, the teachers union needs to have a seat on that table. The ESPs need to have a seat at that table. It's not just, sugarcoating dog and pony, hey, we say hi to you, but actually be part of the body that helps us, make decisions.
What do you believe?
Here we are.
Yeah.
Because I don't represent the union, but I came 22 years from, I keep saying trenches. I loved my job. And just like you get into a career, and this isn't just cliche, you don't get into it. If I wanted to make $100,000, I wouldn't have become a teacher. And that's not what drives me every day, or did drive me every day to get up in the morning. It was the students. And actually, the politics is the part that is the things I don't want to know about when I'm actually educating a student, because I'm there with that child. I have this much time to make a difference, and there's so many challenges, and it's a lot of noise. As a teacher, to be focused, now this is I'm being very open and transparent, to where it is a system that is extremely complicated, and to understand that even I'm at the table here now to that point, and it's still a process to get 1 of 5. I don't want to be in control of everything. I just want to have some type of voice of reality of what's happening in the schools to translate when we make this decision. This is what it looks like to the student in the seat at the school level. And so whether it's through a union or not, I wasn't a part of the union, but there are staff members that don't want to be part of that political process and that do. And so it's hard because you're wanting to get everybody's voice, but at the same time, they're wanting to trust that we're doing what we're doing, so we can kind of get the barriers out of the way to at least just teach. And I guess that's, to hone it down, I think teachers just want to be able to teach. And that's very generic. It's not very out there. Of course, pay is there, and that's hopefully something through our legislative bodies we could be working towards in state level. I know with FSBA, that was something at the conference that was a priority. They're hearing it from everyone. And so the pay is one area here, like one pocket, but it's on the daily living it. We just want to have that relationship time to build with that student to know what's best for them. That's all that I'm.
I have to say there too is, so on my Facebook feed the other day, a teacher friend of mine who used to teach in our district, who's somewhere else now, she said, witnessing a child read is the most amazing thing about my job. And that's really what it is. Like Erica said, teachers become teachers because they have a passion for education and seeing students, learn to read. That's something I did when I taught first grade, second grade, whatnot, and hit those goals. But is inflation real? Is, property value, owning a home a huge hurdle these days for our teachers and things like that? Yes, that is there. But I think the respect thing, I don't think it personally comes from our district, is disrespecting our teachers because we're just disregarding them. I think it's an overall problem that we're having across the country, in the state. We don't respect the profession of education anymore, and that's where we have to figure out how do we fix that in order to be able to provide our teachers with the substance they need to live and not just live, but be able to live comfortably.
Yeah.
So
Maintain them, because there are educators that are going into nursing. They're like, I'm going to have to leave this career path because there's nowhere for me to move up. Especially, I'm speaking as a veteran teacher now, but there are things, like for me, I love that I was on the schedule with my kids and had them with me. Like, access to have a family and to teach is a great path to do. But as far as the profession itself, it's a craft where you can be creative, and I feel like it's hard to have time to do all of that. But the state mandates, though, and now testing, there's state mandated things that have to be done, and that's where, as the policy coming down from the board, that's something that we are required to do. And so we understand that we can't just be on the playground all day with the kids and just enjoy it. It is a learning process too, but it's complicated. I can just say it, when you say teaching staff, it's complicated. I'll put it there.
Like the Facebook identification. It's complicated. Is it equally as complicated for the staff, the support staff? Is it less complicated, more, or equally? Same?
Yeah, because the issue too is, since we're so short certified teachers in the classroom, that we're asking a lot of our paraprofessionals to be permanent subs. You know what I mean? Because sometimes even the subs aren't there. And then what happens is, okay, go in the classroom and teach, but they still got the regular duties to do too. So now they're getting strained as well. So they're doing double duty.
It's the same. It's small varieties, but small variables, but it's the same.
Still complicated.
Still complicated. But I want to take issue with something that was said about, it's not us, it's the state legislature that controls the pay or whatever. That's not true. Our process is controlled at a local level. And this board could skirt or could understand the law well enough to create policy and do things here and be creative. The problem is that you send waves through the system and it's complex and there's pressure. But being here and having the courage to change education for the sake of the teachers is absolutely within our control. And for me, at least for me individually, I would like a superintendent who's not afraid to do that. I would like for him to be able to come in here and say, listen, I've been thinking about this for 20 years. I had an idea. I learned this. I've observed this. I've created this. I'm not afraid to take a risk. If the school board supports me, then I want to make this transition and make this district slightly more innovative than the past 200 years have been in education. That would be great. And that's something that if we have the courage to do that, then we should have a superintendent who's encouraged or who's encourageable, And that can change. The teacher pay thing, I've read the statute. I understand it. We can pay the teachers. That's not an issue. The issue is sending the waves through the district and all the politics that are involved. So I think it's important to be transparent about what we can and cannot do.
So we have some complicated relationships. You mentioned about the parents, and so I want to go to parents and guardians. Do we have a complicated relationship with them? Is it more defined? Is it more engaged and positive?
So parents have always, well, I can't speak on behalf of all parents here, so that I don't want to talk in generalities. So more so, if you're talking politically, climate, they're waking up and being more engaged. I think this is, as a parent and as a staff member, during that shutdown for COVID, when we weren't allowed to have parents on board or coming in to be as engaged, whether you were in your kindergarten classroom reading to kids or doing whatever you were doing on campus, that piece and that time period there, it caused this big rift and other factors in the community as well. Parents want to be involved, and so I think we should create every avenue that we can to get there with them. I do know as a parent, I always felt welcome on campus too, or any family member that came, as long as you were background screening and came into the classroom for safety. But I think that they want to be engaged and involved. And most folks in our community, whether you're talking in leadership roles, wherever, have kids that go to school in their schools too. And so, we are the largest employer in the whole county. And so, for the most part, you either have a family member, a cousin, or somebody in your family has someone that's in the school system, whether they're teaching or whether they're driving a bus or whether they are attending. So, keeping that key piece, we're driving that with the parents.
Are there enough avenues for different involvement levels for different types of parents and families?
No, there always can be improved, to say it that way too.
Thank you for that input, Mrs. Booth. I have a slightly different opinion about that for a couple of reasons. I think where my schools are, I have two kinds of schools. I have schools where parents are involved from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. just like the teachers, and they're able to volunteer at the schools, and they're able to fundraise, and the entire community is invested in the schools, and the teachers having everything that they need. And then I have on the other side of the spectrum schools where parents just can't make it because they're working and they maybe live in a hotel. We don't have avenues for those parents. They don't have time, and they don't have the resources. They don't have the language. They want to be involved. We don't have the avenues for them. And so that affects their student. It affects their student's performance. That is, in my opinion, the biggest thing that I need from a superintendent is to find ways to involve those parents that are working 3 jobs to put food at the table, and they still can't afford an apartment, and their kids don't have the supplies. How do you get them to a SAC meeting? So slightly different opinion.
Yeah, And to me, there's like two different things on that issue of parental involvement. To a certain degree, like one opinion that I had was, if you just have a SAC meeting to have a SAC meeting, hardly any participation or very minimal, the same folks. But one time there was a talent show, and boy, parents showed up like crazy. So I was like, hey, Dan, this is creative. Hey, the first 20 minutes of that talent show, let the kids get dressed in the back. And the first 20 minutes, hey, we got an audience. It's going to be a SAC meeting. You know what I mean? It's a SAC meeting, the first end of it, and the second meeting, it's going to be a talent show, and we get to see our kids perform. So that's where when we think about creativity, I just gave you a specific example on how we need to be creative like that. Meet students where they're at, meet parents where they're at. And then the other thing too, parents too, have a tendency to, well, I don't want them, some of them tend to be louder than others, so I don't want those outliers to give the impression that the district isn't listening to parents, because there's some that come to every board meeting and they let us have it, no matter what the issue is. So I don't want there to be a perception problem that we're not listening to parents at all. I think the one issue that we could get better is not so much communicating with them, but informing them of everything. Like, what are their rights? And there was an issue about mental health. If they see a counselor, well, how long after they see a counselor before we let them know? At expulsion hearings, some parents didn't know that they could get access to the cameras. Like, yes, you do. But we weren't uniform, but they weren't codified. Unless they knew the law, they wouldn't know to call the principal and say, you know what, it's my right to have the camera. My student got involved in a fight. I want to see the evidence for myself. So those are little details that, again, this district loves to put a wall. There shouldn't be a wall. It's like us versus parents. No, they're stakeholders. You know what I mean? Hey, here's the evidence. If we're doing the right thing, we shouldn't, because you give the impression that you're hiding something when you create that false barrier. No, here's the thing, and if they see something that we don't like, we change our mind. So it's like, it should be a neutral type scenario where we're evaluating things. And I think parents want that respect too. They want to know that they're being informed whenever things are happening to their student. Because I can agree with that more than parents dictating how we should educate them. When they tell us, I don't like this book or that book, that's a little too far. But when you say, hey, these are the books that are available, this is our processes, this is the appeals process, these are what we want you to do, that's a little bit different. And I think that we can get better at informing our parents what are our processes to get involved and to know what's happening.
Do you guys have a student member of your board?
We did. We had to get rid of that. So that's one thing. When you talk about students, we'll talk about that in a second. We did have a student board member, but we do not at the moment. If I can go back to the parent conversation though, one of our goals under community engagement is to, where is it? It's one about parents being partners in education, and I don't feel like that's where we are right now. I will agree in some level with what Mr. Melendez and Mr. Arguello both said, that there is a wall. It's us versus them for some parents, but there are just parents who are just like, go to school. Part of that is because that's how they operate. They have to operate that way because you're working 35 jobs and their inflation is real and milk hasn't been purchased. Like, that is a real thing. But we cannot, the equation for a successful school district includes parent involvement. You can have everything else, and if the parent involvement for most students isn't there, it doesn't matter what we do. This right here is like the most important thing to me right now, is how do we get, when I say parent involvement, it's not just going to a SAC meeting, it's not just coming to a board meeting. Board meetings, what the heck? Okay, cool, like I see what the electeds are doing. I don't care as much about that as what the kids are learning in school. That's the important thing.
Right. Is my child moving forward with
Is
his
my child
reading
moving
and
forward?
literacy?
Can I understand how to help my child? Can I understand that if my child is not behaving in school, they're not only affecting their education, but the education of other students? There's got to be an effort to bring parents and caretakers, because some of our students are being taken care of by other
guardians,
folks.
whatever. Yeah.
Guardians, caretakers, to be invested in that part of the equation. We can't do it without them. It's just not going to happen. This is like the biggest one for me, so I wanted to go back to that.
I can tell.
Yeah, sorry.
Let's shift quickly to students, and let me know your I heard about your high school programs that really are targeted to engage students, and I heard that some of the feeder schools are starting to do that to also engage students. But what else do you see as the crown jewels for student engagement, or what do you see that's missing that you'd like to see developed?
So back to FSBA, when we had the conference, they had some great sessions. My favorite was the student panel. Sitting in there, listening to, like, we can be making these decisions and everything that's happening here. What does it look like in their eyes? Because where can we, and they let us have it.
They sure did.
And that's what, we need it. We need to hear the good, bad, and ugly to help make change and help move things forward. And so I know that there is a student panel that I believe Dr. Pacer, that's been going on for years to do. I can't speak on behalf of that because I was more at the school level, but I think there's always room for improvement too. So, yeah.
It's the voices that we hear from that are also a challenge. Sometimes when we think about diversity and inclusion, it's all of a sudden a terrible word because, ooh, what does that mean? I mean, all students, right? All means all. That's part of, what we say. And I believe that there are students who never get talked to because they're the ones that are being suspended, or the ones that are not in the advanced classes, or the ones that are just barely skating by. But those are the ones I want to hear from. Because at the end of the day, they're the majority of our students. We can't just have the opinions of the top students, and that affects all of them, right? So finding ways to engage the average student, the below average student, I think is an important aspect that we're missing.
I heard that during campaigning
Yeah.
from parents, and I would have to say, I feel that myself. My 3 kids are a wide variety of educational abilities. So I do have one student that she performs average, and she has to really work hard to get that great grade. And so figuring out ways to hear those kids, see those kids, and recognize those kids. Because, when you think about education too, there's that bell curve that we all, so the C student, that average student is going to be sitting here. That's not a bad thing. That they're getting by, they're doing what they need. How do we better support those students? So I do think that is.
I think that I would disagree in this. I agree with what you guys are saying and intend, but I disagree with the fact that we're not hearing those students. Our entire educational model today is driven to those students. And so there are some kids with specialized programs, there are some kids who are way behind, and those kids get a whole bunch of money thrown at them. But in the end, the model, right, like we don't deliver the world's greatest education to every student. We deliver an education to these body of students, which is the majority part of the bell curve. And that's who it is that we're servicing, which is why that's where all the kids are at, right? And that bell curve went from being a standard bell curve to now it's just like this, right? And these groups are getting smaller and smaller because everybody's getting pushed into this group. And I mean, it has a lot to do with the parents, I think. But at the same time, it's like people are just trying to survive in their jobs. The teachers are trying to survive in their jobs. And, nobody wants to fill out a packet of this for your kids with ESE or ELL or whatever. And it's just a gigantic mess. So, but there's absolutely, positively no doubt that all of our kids are performing worse than they were 30 years ago in education. There's just statistically, all the metrics are showing our kids are not reading as well, And now as a teacher, I'm horrified by the kids that are in my class. I'm absolutely.
Where do you teach?
In Polk.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
And just looking at the performances, I'm horrified. How does a kid get to middle school reading at this level? Or writing at this level? I was the kid that made my life want to quit. My teacher quit. That was me as a student. I was the one that was always suspended. And when I was a student, nobody was paying attention to what little Johnny was doing, right? But at the same time, I survived, and even I could write. When I graduated high school, I could certainly write, and these kids are not. So now what do? Like the kids that are not going to graduate, you put them in a classroom, you throw them all in here, you put them on a computer, they're doing their work trying to catch up so they can get the credits to graduate so that our graduation score can not embarrass the county. And that's not delivering education. That's not resolving the problem. All it is keeping people in their jobs. That's the only function that it really does. So I think that the kids in the center of the bell curve and the process of delivering education to that portion of the bell curve has hijacked education from us ever achieving what our mission statement is, So highest potential, I mean, how many kids? So few kids are reaching their highest potential in our district and probably throughout the entire state and the country. So,
And this is a complicated subject because obviously you have students on different spectrums. A lot of times the kids that are struggling get a little overemphasis to get them to the curve, but then we forget our gifted students and allow them to fly. Because another issue that it's almost like the state coming to us too. If a student struggles in reading, for instance, they're assigned intensive reading or intensive math. So there goes that full subject area or class period dedicated to just that. And the reality is they may be struggling with just fractions, not all of math. So here we prevented their ability to take another elective or do something else just to fix them 100% in math. And it's like, man, and they don't get to have any fun. It's like they're just a bunch of robots, And one concept that I was trying to introduce was that we have a class period where you're not dedicated to anything. But we're not allowed to because the state may not give us funding and things like that. And we talk about what we may want to do. Because I want a class period where it's just a class period. You know what I mean? And it's like, especially at the middle school level. Because elementary, it's not really a big deal. But a class period where if you do struggle in math, you can focus on that area. Or if you're accelerating math, well, guess what? Maybe you could tutor some of the kids in there. And so it's not just a teacher, you're teaching them. Or you're working on a project. You know what I mean? Like if you're doing a science project and you're really good at science, well, do an experiment to do something that takes 2 or 3 weeks long. Or if you want to do a club, because that was another thing that kind of what Ms. Castillo alluded to earlier. Some people want to be a part of clubs, but they can't stay after school because their parents don't have time to take them. But if we have that class period where it's like devoid, we can call it intensive something, just create a name for it or something like that. But allow a space and just one class period, you know what I mean? Where you're still taking all your other classes, but then those students then you could be creative and say, okay, the ones that are excelling, you could do some fun stuff. The ones that are struggling in specific areas can get reading coaches or math coaches to go to that. But to earmark a complete class, you're in intensive reading the entire semester, and they might have just been struggling a little bit. Now they can't have that flexibility to do other things, and that's where it kind of becomes a little bit of a challenge.
that might be a good expansion but a superintendent who's not going to control what teachers are doing in the classroom at the most deepest level. Because right now, I think that we are very, the district is teaching these classes. And so we're taking the fun part of a teacher's job away from them, which is organizing how they're going to transfer this knowledge to that student. And they're being told what you're going to transfer to that student on a particular day and so on. And so it's not allowing for our teachers to become the best teachers that they can be either. And it's not taking advantage of their natural talents. So, I mean, a superintendent who understands strategically what their job is, they're not going to be just teaching in the classroom in every single one of our classes, maybe.
I heard your mouth, and I saw you
I
wanted
just
to.
wanted to defer to the teachers in the room, especially Ms. Booth, since you've been there.
So, I mean, we can get into the nitty gritty here. When I see this, and this is just a more bird's eye view here, and the system in general. So when I see just, for example, like this agenda here, and nothing to the point to the agenda, but to point, the last bullet point here was students. And for me, I feel like it needs to be completely flipped. Before we start talking about our congressional delegation in county and municipalities, we need to flip that whole chart around and start with the students first, then parents, teaching, staff. Like it just, to me, that's how I feel when you talk about respect or you talk about the system in general. Students, I believe that should be coming to the first thing that we talk about, because that is why we're here. And so I don't know how else to say that and that way, but that's a point.
I appreciate that. I mean,
but in the conversation,
it came from a different
I know,
angle, but
no, I'm
you
not
make a
here
good
to-
point, and we'll move it. We'll change it
I'm
next
not here
time.
to nitpick that, but
No.
But that's just an example of a way where it's, the students are first. And it's not just a slogan, that's to create more change, is keeping that in mind, and so that's
No, I
my
appreciate your
opinion.
honesty.
That's my
I
opinion,
appreciate your
so.
honesty.
But
I do want to talk, and we're at an hour and a half, so I want each of you to speak, if you would, to the board superintendent relationship that you're seeking, so that we know kind of what you're looking for. And I recognize that as you're answering the question, you may have some differences, but that's going to help us. But if you could kind of look at the categories here under board superintendent relationship, and anything that you feel like we need to know that's going to be important for you, that's what we'd like to hear before we end this part of the meeting. I don't know who wants to go first.
This is a large organization, and I'm putting this first because I assume that other board members will have other things to say as well that I would agree with. But for me, the business acumen is important, and understanding how to inspire a team is important. And I'm just going to add to echo Mrs. Booth, student-focused.
Okay, anybody else want to add?
There's one on evaluation documents too, like of our expectations. At some point, I want to modify ours, because we have an evaluation instrument from like 1 to 5, right? And 3 typically is in the middle. But here, we have 4, and it says meet expectations. And meet expectations is just meeting expectations, not excelling. And we have it where the superintendent gets a bonus in that particular area if they do 3 or better, amongst the majority. And to me, it's like meeting expectations shouldn't qualify as a bonus. It's when you exceed expectations.
So you're looking for someone who will consistently exceed expectations.
Correct, exactly. So we have to redo that evaluation document where 3 is the middle, 4 is kind of exceeding, 5 is like excellent. And then we say, okay, to qualify for a bonus, which, that's a whole nother topic, but to be incentivized, you should be exceeding expectations, not meeting expectations to generate that bonus.
Okay.
are we going down the line here or still on that?
All of it, I'm asking you.
Communication to me is key, and whether that ties into emergency, crisis, what's happening, what's the trending coming down, what are we hearing? I have to have communication, and whether I agree with it or not, it has to happen, and so that's very important to me. Not just taking a phone call, but really digging into where do I need to be to make decisions or help move different things or work on. Yeah, I just need the communication piece, especially in safety and crisis and communication in that way as well too, so.
Are you satisfied the way the communication line is going now?
I mean, I've been on the board since November, so it's been fairly new, but like I said, I don't know if it's just me being new and engagement is high, but as far as in this role, I've every time I've reached out to somebody or had communication, whether it's actually 11 o'clock at night or it doesn't matter, it's just like, I don't have hours.
Right.
And I check my email like at different times of the day too, so we're on 24/7, and I feel as a board member you should be. So that I haven't had any issues, but no, it's just moving forward, something that is important to me.
Heather, John?
I think the things that have been said so far are definitely things that are at the forefront for me. I think we've talked a lot internally amongst ourselves about outside of the box. That's something that we just need moving forward is we can't just do the norm. We do have to have things that are going to really push us forward and having that outside of the box thinking and strategizing. I think relationships are huge, so I do think someone that's going to be able to build those relationships, especially if they're coming externally, we've got to have good relationships in place in order to meet the needs of our staff and our students and our families.
I heard earlier about accessibility to staff, which you all, I believe, said you appreciate, because there are some superintendents with a different management style than that want everything to flow through the superintendent. But what you are used to and like, I believe, is the accessibility to all the staff.
Well, this would be a new superintendent. They have no relationship with the staff. They need to be in there in order, in my opinion, in order to kind of
form that team.
John, thoughts on superintendent-board relationship?
Yeah, I think that they have to be an outstanding leadership, which would involve three things to me: accountability, transparency, creativity, and innovation, being the third, and that they are devoid of politics. I would not want someone who is political or someone who that's what their goal is. That's what what they enjoy. I'm looking for someone who can lead this district, not somebody who's
Not politically aligned, just politically.
not politically aligned. Of course, I would not want someone to be politically aligned, but I mean not political nature. Not somebody who's going to come in here and play games of that nature, and somebody who's going to come in here and innovate our district and understand that the goal here is to deliver a high-quality education to our students and do it in a transparent manner, that he is a steward of the public's money, and to come here and be a CEO,
Yeah, and to me, it's like
not a chief politician.
like the faithful execution of the policies too, and that's kind of where the politics comes
That's
into play, is
great.
organizational
That's
politics.
a great one.
Like for instance, right now, I'll get a little specific, is, construction and maintenance usually are always together in the same department, but there's personalities in there that aren't getting along. So instead of making them getting along or implement a policy to do that, they'd rather just kind of play in a different sandbox. The same thing also, we said we want local vendors and participation, yet there were certain contracts where, local vendors weren't really there, or smaller companies weren't there. And I don't want to get into the details, but to me,
Faithful execution of the policies.
Yeah,
That's a great way to put it.
I wrote that down.
because if I want
That is great.
to increase trust with staff, when we say something, we want it to be there. You know what I mean? It's like I shouldn't have to question it. We had for instance, we have an RFP tonight for the real estate brokerage. We had a board meeting last time talking about, let's look at the score sheets and what was the method for it, and we didn't get it. We said we're going to re-vote on it tonight, and we still have the same list that we had last time, and we didn't get what was the reasoning behind it, what was the intent behind it. So it's kind of like pulling teeth a little bit. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, so help us help you and kind of work together.
Is there anything that we haven't touched on that we need to know as your search firm?
I think this was a great first conversation, really learning along with you how this works. So I'd like to hear more from your perspective from HR, just, because we heard a lot about, if that's okay, because I hear you very often too, so to have you at the table as well. But this district this large.
About a candidate or candidates?
Just the process.
Kind of the search time, maybe that's what I'm getting to.
Or even like human resources, like a collaborative environment. Like what have other districts have done to create a more collaborative environment with its employees? That's where we have a big deficit.
Well, I think that, I would assume you have an administrative association, any kind of formal association of your administrators, whether they be district or school level. We know we have the instructional staff, and we've got the educational support professionals. So back from my HR days, if we said the board is considering a policy on, and I'll make this simple, timesheets for support staff. We try to maintain in HR an open relationship with our teachers, junior, and administrative staff and the support staff. It just made sense to do that. If you get adversarial, then you don't accomplish a whole lot. So we always try to involve those groups. So if there was a move by the board to look at time sheets at transportation because of the early hours and late hours, and was out a need to do that, we would look to that group of officers for that support group to say, here are some issues. We've got folks in the morning that maybe aren't coming on time, staying later than they should. Overtime, that can cause a problem. You have Fair Standards Act, you have to deal with that. So I think involvement of your stakeholders, and from an HR perspective, it was always the first thought was, okay, how's it going to impact that guidance counselor? if we look at this for parent-teacher conferences. Let's get some input, so, because we had a board who said, what are guidance counselors going to think about this issue of 2 parent conferences per month? I mean, so I think, it's kind of do your research, get all the input you can so that you, as from an HR perspective, can bring in what you think will be the best recommendation for your board, because we never in HR wanted to put the board in the spot to be, nor did we want to put the superintendent in that spot either. So I think do your homework as much as you can, turn over as many rocks as you can, because if you're really, you have an involved board, they're going to ask reasonable questions and you need to have reasonable answers. So I think stakeholder input, so a superintendent, who are your stakeholders? It's the kids, it's the parents, it's moms and dads, it's the teachers and administrators and support staff, it's your community leaders. So superintendent's a big job.
Well, and you bring up input, and that's really the next thing we want to talk about, because John is going to develop the timeline that we would recommend, but we can't develop the timeline until we have some key pieces of information about who you want to have input, in what fashion or form you want that input, when you want to start date, those sorts of things. But Bill also has some thoughts about some potential avenues for input. So Bill, I'll let you speak to that.
And one thing I want to say about HR is we do a lot of work with HR. John has probably worked in HR, probably in more than half the districts in the state. He's trained all new superintendents in HR. And I was in HR when I was here in Osceola County before I became superintendent, and John actually trained me.
Learn together so fast.
He'll say that. And so that's not a subject we can address right today. That's going to take a little bit more time, but that's something that we can look at later. We can look at later on. We have some specific issues about HR. But as far as the input, there are several things that we will suggest, and then we'll put it all in a timeline. It's interesting you brought up students first. Well, there is a student, just some thoughts for you. There is a student advisory committee meeting this Friday morning. And we have a protocol which we use, gathering information from different constituent groups. And students are meeting this Friday morning. So if the board would like to have this part of their input session, I'm prepared to come down Friday morning at 7:30, and that would be an input session with the Student Advisory Committee. It's very difficult to get input from students, and we do this in a lot of districts. We really like to hear from the students. It's hard to get a lot of input from all students that may not be in the student government groups or so forth, but this is a good start. So that's one thing that we do. We have a protocol where we bring students in. I understand it'll be about 25 students, and then we ask them what are the strengths of the district and what don't we want changed. We ask them what the challenges and the issues are facing a new superintendent, and then we also ask them what qualities and qualifications they want in the new superintendent. And we do that. So planning that pending board approval. I also learned there's a meeting of the ESP group. There's another group this Thursday afternoon. I just learned that right now. If you want to get input from that group, I'm prepared to do a similar thing with that this Thursday. Also, more than happy to meet with teachers, and we work extremely well with teachers. We do that. I'm actually the chief negotiator for Manatee Schools. I used to be a negotiator around here, and have a very collaborative relationship in Manatee. On that, I'm more than happy to meet with the teachers and open it up to all teachers or teachers association, however you want to do that. You can do that. And if you have administrative association, I know back years ago you had an administrative association or a group of administrators are happy to do that also. So that takes the internal input from the organization. Only what we do with that is I would coordinate with Mrs. Schaefer and go all of that input we gather, and John and I do these sessions, And then what we do is we compile all the results, and then we send it out to the board members after every session, and that's the first section of our input. Second,
And, to be clear, we use the same protocol with all the groups?
Right.
So the
Right.
information is the same. You'll see what the
It's all the same.
students think, this group thinks, this group rank as the focus groups.
correct.
Can we just briefly discuss
Oh, yeah.
the groups, like who, I'm concerned about two specific, not concerned,
No,
I just
okay.
think maybe we'll,
Perhaps, depending on the board, we might want to open up the conversations to students that are not just students in that advisory group, because I think that those are our top students, and that's great, but we might need to get some opinions from students who are not selected for that group. And then also for our teachers, definitely excited and glad that you're seeking from the union teachers, but also there's a lot of teachers that are not in the union. And I would personally like to hear what they have to say as well.
We would definitely open that up, and the avenues of getting input from other students, we're very open for that. Possibly that could be done through surveys or another way to do that, and we're open if you have a suggestion on how to do that. But as far as, if you'd like that, at least would get us started on the particular area. If anybody has any idea.
There's one thing I was thinking about also, when we mentioned at the other presentation, and I've been through a couple of these already, through 2 superintendent searches. I like the concept of having our own community committee, right? And it can be composed of, say, like one student, one teacher, one ESP, which is support staff, and say one Teamster, because we got cafeteria workers, and right? Then each one of the board members can appoint somebody to that as well. And I see that being twofold. Number one, kind of getting that input together of what they think, what does the ideal superintendent look like? Because we have our own opinion, but it's nice to hear what the cross-section of folks, what are some of their issues. And then the second part of that can be, I think we talked about it before, is like having a selection process. Now what that is, if that's narrowing it down to top 3, top 7, because I think you mentioned like the number 7 was a possible number. When
It's happened before, yeah.
But kind of like taking in all the requisites that are coming in, right? Or all the applications that are being submitted and kind of narrowing it down to that. So I think they can have like 2 different meetings. What's important in a superintendent, kind of like what we're doing now, and then kind of helping read the initials. And, but I think it was important that when they screen it, it doesn't mean that the board doesn't look at it. So what if they missed a potential applicant that you really like? I mean, we could probably have that ability to kind of insert it in the final thing, but I like the idea of having them kind of narrow down the field a little bit and saying, okay, this is who we think are the best folks. And then the board can kind of reconvene after that, and as far as a timeline, look at their recommendations, look at the others to see if we agree with that recommendation, and then kind of narrow it from there.
I'll speak to that. What we also had heard, I'll come back to this, but we also had heard that you thought it would be good to have community forums throughout the county. Okay, so that, and we would be able to go out, we would go work through Mrs. Schaefer and set it up. We usually do it like a high school media center, we would do a community forum where we get the input from all 5 areas or how many.
Internal, external
Right.
students, everyone.
Anybody can come to that.
Everyone.
And we would do the same process on that, using that. And anybody can go to any forum if they can't make it a particular date or any way like that.
Like a different time too, so like some folks can't do nights or maybe whatever.
We
It
can
just
look at
offer-
that.
For sure.
We definitely can do that, and that would work out. Now, as far as the advisory committee you're talking about, and I'm going to just give you pro and con on that. We've done that in the past in some districts. But what's happened lately, and I'm going to have Andrea follow up after I open this up for discussion, is that there are so many, in a district this size, there are so many organizations, and there are so many different people that you'd like to put on the committee, that if you limit it to only having each board member only appointing one person, you get yourself into a situation where you get a lot of people really upset because why didn't I get picked? And it ends up, and then we've seen in other districts where the people on this committee are actually targeted by other people. They're accused of selecting the superintendent, which they don't do. And so that has really backfired on it, even though we tell them not to go ahead. We go through, there's a sunshine committee, we tell them that they don't have the authority to do it. It's been perceived as being negative to the board and the individuals that have served on it. Go ahead.
It's been under criticism. The board has received criticism for choosing a select group. Why is this person not another? And the persons serving on those committees have really come under, I don't want to call it attack, but they were not elected officials like you all are. And they take on a public role by being in that sort of a committee. And the criticisms of people serving in public roles is different today than it was 6 months ago, a year ago. So we'll do whatever the board wants. We just want you to know that it's not without some challenges and without some potential, the people serving on the committee, first off, some people may not be willing to serve that would have served a year ago. Secondly, some people during the process will say, I'm out. I didn't sign up for this. I don't need to be socially bashed on social media because I thought this candidate had a certain quality that somebody else doesn't think they should have. It's a whole different tenor of criticism today of people who are acting on behalf of the public than it used to be. So we just want to provide that context. However, we've been thinking through it, and we're like, okay, how can we do a similar exercise without the public?
Minimizing.
Right.
There's going to be
Correct.
public scrutiny no matter what.
Correct. So we've really thought through how to do that. And one way that we've thought might work would be if you identify what would be that sort of group of people, and then they get a certain targeted survey. So they're not meeting necessarily, but they have a certain targeted survey. So you know the results of this particular question, survey, whatever it might be, comes from one of these, this, a certain targeted group. We also thought, with regard to the filtering piece of looking at the applications, that same group who could get the initial targeted survey, and we might just call them the targeted survey group or whatever it might be, they could also then, when the resumes start coming in, they could review each resume without a meeting. They're not talking about them with their peers at a meeting, but they could review each resume and provide input, again, targeted input committee. Here are the strengths I see in this resume. Here are the concerns or the questions that I have of this resume. So that then when you all, after all the applications have been received, you'll have a real compilation from this committee of here are the strengths they see on this candidate, here are the challenges they see with this candidate, which could help you then to filter. By not having them make a specific recommendation of continue to consider these applicants, we believe that filter can give you the input you're seeking, but protect them from undue scrutiny. So it's a thought we wanted to put out there.
The other thing is, each of the board members could maybe select 10 people. So that would give you 50 people. And everybody would know. You don't even have to discuss it.
About 5.
Or 5, or however you want. You know what I'm saying.
More than one.
Right.
Right. It doesn't have to be
Send
more.
those to Dana, and then she could go ahead and make a list. All the board members know who they are, but you'd have time to think about who you'd want, and you could go ahead and do it. So that would be, and everybody know who they are, and then they could be targeted out, so you know what they get an invitation to take the survey, and they get some directions on it.
And you would know the results.
You
This
know the
is
results
the
of
group,
that
this
group.
is the 50 that we've asked for or
Is
whatever.
this the same survey that we would be doing at the community meetings?
It depends on what you want.
Right, right.
It would be maybe more targeted.
Invite them to that meeting.
Right, they could go, the community meetings will all get the same questions, the same 3 questions. What don't we want to change? We don't want someone to come in here and mess up what we like. What challenges and opportunities are the new superintendent going to face? And then what qualities and qualifications that you're going to have. So we'll get, all of those get the exact same thing, and then we do all the compilation for that and bring that back to you.
So it could be their first survey response would be the same answers, but you would see them bifurcated from everyone else, because the whole community may think this, but these targeted people think this. The second phase of the filtering of the applications would really be the piece that differentiates them.
The applicant, like selecting like from a group.
The top.
The
Like,
top,
no,
okay.
no, what we do is we post, once the applications come in, we post those on the website portal, so everybody can look at them, the same information that they send in. So they could identify the strengths and the questions they have about each of those applicants. They wouldn't rank them, they wouldn't do anything except answer those.
You definitely don't want
Right,
ranking.
right.
We don't rank.
We
No,
don't want to even rank them, and then you'd have that feedback from them. So that's, that's just a suggestion. We're, like Andrea said, we're willing
We're trying to
do what you
figure out
wanna
how
do.
we can meet your
To me, that,
desire.
that kind of like, it kind of skirts around it. Most people aren't afraid to, it's like, if that was the case, there'd be nobody in the military, or there would be no police officers, because they'd be afraid to do their job. You know what I mean? Yeah,
But they sign up
yeah,
for that.
Yeah, sign up, no, but the same thing is, no, I wouldn't appoint somebody that doesn't want to do it either. You know what I mean? I would appoint somebody that wants to participate, because I sit on multiple selection committees. I sit down with congressmen, and we do the vetting for the veterans, the military, the students that want to join the military academies. There's some kind of intangible value. Like, I can understand that if you want to bifurcate it, like, at first, they just look at it and they do the evaluative instrument, but there's something about working together with the group. And again, you should be appointing good people, and that's why we have like a cross-section of people who have a vested interest. And let them get in there and have a conversation about, because it's about the community also developing trust with that appointee too, that it wasn't a fix, that it wasn't, this person just was automatically guaranteed the job. So I believe that by skirting that, you're going to get that in blowback. And I'd rather not have that blowback, because all of a sudden the superintendent's already a handicap. You know what I mean? Saying, this person wasn't in there. I'd rather them have those difficult discussions.
Well, we're
know,
willing to do
we're
whatever the
willing to do
board
whatever you'd like
wants.
to
We
do.
just need to know what the board wants.
But I'm just giving you the justification for
Right.
it, though, because
Yeah.
I've been a person.
Believe
where-
me,
when I
we've done it for
criticize,
years.
I don't like to criticize without having a
No.
reasoning behind, a logical reasoning. Now, people can disagree with my logic, but at least try to give you that, because the part of that logic is to have a sustainable new superintendent that's going to be accepted by the community. And if we just kind of like don't allow those difficult conversations to happen a little bit in the beginning, because maybe a couple of people might email and say, no, I think that's healthy. It's healthy to have a little bit of a tensious discussion, because then you work it through and say, okay, well, these are the benefits. I think there's a benefit to having that selection committee have those difficult conversations and say, okay, who do we recommend? Whether it's ranked or if it's not in order, or just they can say, hey, here are the top 7, and just give you top 7, but without a number, without 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But we can say, hey, we've individually graded them, like on their own, like say, for instance, they get the resumes, and then they get together and they say, okay, these are the top 7. Can we agree to the top 7 without a specific order ranking structure? And then the board can sit there and.
And that's typically how we've always done it. We don't ever say top 7. We say these are the ones the board ought to
These are the
continue to
finalists
consider.
or something like that, or here's
We recommend continuing the process, is what we say. And John runs those meetings, and we don't have any issues with running those meetings.
No.
You might want to comment
But-
on it.
Let's hear some, go ahead, Erica.
No, I respectfully this is such an important decision that I want as much input as possible. And I don't take my role lightly. I am elected to make this decision.
Yes, ma'am.
And so, with the board, of course, but I'm the one to take the criticism. That's what I signed up for. And so I want true input. You all are the experts to hear, and I appreciate also, I didn't even know that was a pathway to go, which I'm more interested in. But I'm hearing everything, and so it isn't just my decision, but I want to feel like that I've seen everything that I can look at too, right? And so, not that I don't put trust in other folks as well, but I need more information. So I like that yours had, the way that you had talked about that, which I want to hear a little bit more about maybe in future, but that is an avenue that I am, at this point right now, looking towards, so.
Instead of a committee like what he's describing?
Well, it's more, and now I'm fresh out of an election cycle, so I can tell you that you're exactly correct that times are a little different, especially in education and the focus, which I'm grateful that folks are paying attention finally to education. But at the same time, there are a lot of folks that don't even want to touch this. They have a great opinion, but don't even want, and that's where you have your private conversations, but but it's important that they're heard too. And so that's where I'm at.
I think that the most important part of this process is transparency. I actually sat on a superintendent search committee in this district 10 years ago or whatever. And that was an extremely valuable process. That was, I mean, I would want to do that again. My opinion is that we would do that again, that we pick 2 or 3 people to sit on a panel, and we bring on the union, we bring on reps from different organizations, and and to have 15 people or 16 or 17 people on a committee to discuss it. Number one, I think that we would find plenty of people to come and serve. I think that would be easy. I think that to not involve them, especially because it's in the ether now, we're basically saying no to a level of transparency, and we're saying no to a level of input that people want to have. I remember when we did have that search committee, people were breaking down the door to be part of it and to be involved. And people came and they sat here and they all listened intently. And it was a very vibrant conversation. It was very passionate. It was very, but more than anything else, it was useful to the board members and it was useful to the community. The community felt they were a part of it. They felt that it was transparent. Everybody knew what was going on. It was kind of like watching the speaker election, in the House. People were part of it. And so to not do that and then to say private conversation, I mean.
No, not private, meaning that they just don't, they want to be heard, but are frankly afraid of the political backlash.
There's a public
or
risk in
things.
saying
There
something.
is.
Sure,
And
but
that's
those
what
are
I
not
mean.
the
We're
people
like-
that would be on
we're
this
like
committee.
my-
You would put people on this committee who would want to serve, understand that you're going to be here, that
But
those
you
cameras are
might
there.
also consider putting people on this committee who you pick specifically because they're not seeking to be in the public sphere, because they have a specific
But they can provide you
expertise.
counsel at any point in time, right? So, I mean, you're not excluding anybody by that. You're just creating a process in which the citizens and the stakeholders are actually involved as opposed to not involving them or involving them in some way that the public can't see.
And there are public meetings. That
But at the
committee.
end of the day, it's fine. I understand what you guys are saying, and in some parts I agree, so I'm not disagreeing, but I wholeheartedly believe that there are people who may want to do this are like, hell no. Not if it's going to be televised. And I'm like, but I want you to, you know what I mean? So you're basically, your sample is going to be very different perhaps. And that could be a good thing. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. I just have more questions, if I may.
Sure.
For Andrea. With regards to the selection of the top whatever, is there a possibility of giving the committee the information for the candidates without their names on it, just resume?
The reason that would be a challenge, and we just had this conversation in
Yeah.
another
I
district,
mean,
is
speak to the
because
applicants themselves, like remove their name.
Remove the applicants' names.
as soon as somebody applies, their application becomes public.
The application, does that include their resume and all of that information?
Yeah, it's public, it's a public record. And so while we could, for the committee, remove the name, all they would have to do is go to your website and they would see the name. Or they may have already seen it before they got a copy of it. So it really wouldn't, it wouldn't, then you get even more accused of lack of transparency.
There's a very specific reason why I'm asking to remove the names, though, by the way. It's actually to protect the candidates and to make sure that we have the best person and not that there isn't any bias.
But the law doesn't allow for that.
Understood.
We're
I
charged with
just-
protecting the public, not the candidates.
I'm sorry?
We're charged with protecting the public, not the candidates. So, I mean, I agree with you, I understand the
yeah.
point, but
I
I
heard
mean,
Jen is
we have
like,
a job.
can we have like an
job.
evaluation?
It's the Florida Public Records, will we get applicants from out of state argument that we constantly have. And currently in Florida, we don't have the ability to shield information. It's public from the day it's received.
And then if I could, we would recommend that in an application that the board accept a cover letter, current cover letter, a current resume, no more than 3 letters of recommendation, and then a copy of your college transcripts that reflect the highest degree that you hold.
Official transcripts, by the
Official,
way.
right. So
So we don't have that problem.
Basically, if we get into that redaction issue, your recommendation letters are going to have it. There'll be references throughout the resume. There'll be reference certainly in the transcript. So I think would be, more or less fairly difficult.
It would be futile.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts on having a committee?
My only
versus-
thought was, is there a way, because part of what you said, where it was about the fact of us each nominating one person or whatever, and it can kind of
However
cause.
many,
Is there a way to offer maybe a lottery of sorts where we've got like a number of people that have shown interest in it and it's randomly selected and then it's not really.
We have had that in other districts where, I wouldn't call it a lottery, but where people applied, and then the board looked at the applicants, but because the board wanted to make sure that there was some balance and some representation, they looked at the applicants, and I think they took maybe 10 from the random applicants, but then each board member got an appointee to try to make sure that
Well, that's what I'm saying.
certain
It's not,
populations were
because
reflected.
I
But
wouldn't
that's
want
your-
it skewed
your
in
choice.
one way by,
Yeah, then it applied. It worked out well.
Let's just say each board member had 2 appointees, then how you select your 2, we don't question it, and it shouldn't be a vote either. Your 2 appointees are your 2 appointees, like, there's no vote of the general board to say, we accept yours.
I just heard
It's not
everyone
like the
saying
business
that they
advisory board
wanted
do it.
so much
You know, each
input
board
from
member
the
gets to appoint
community,
their
and if
own.
we want something that, so, if we want teachers, parents, whatever, like, if there's a way for, but I didn't know if that's something that's been done, or.
We have
Then pick
seen,
3. I mean, and then if each person's allowed 3, then you can put, if you can put 3 teachers, you can put 3 SPs, you can put, 3 community members, you can put 3 of whomever you like.
Correct, and I like that idea where each one of us chooses individually too, like, we don't have to get it approved, you know what I mean? So Erica says, hey, these are my people, and John says, these are mine, Terry says, these are yours, and then, like I said, the only thing I would add to that is, we do, separate from our appointments, maybe at least one student, whether it's student advisory committee, we have one teacher, whether they're union or non-union, we have one ESP, and because, to be a part of that, just to guarantee that cross-section, because our appointment is our appointment, but it's nice to have a certain degree of neutrality and independence looking at that.
That's what I
too.
wanted. I wanted the neutrality, that not someone that's connected to each of us individually.
Well, to a certain
Yeah,
degree,
but
to a certain degree, it is politics. You can't dissect out politics completely, because to a certain degree, that
I would
dynamic
just think
exists.
that neutrality in this district, just like the media library book committee, that was supposed to be neutral, but clearly you don't get 19 votes in the same direction when it's neutral. It's better for it to be honest and just, you pick your 3, you pick your 3, you pick your 3. You have the union involved, of course. You have a student, let the student be a random student body. Let them all apply and you pick a random student.
Right.
I mean.
And at the end of the day,
I wasn't
too-
taking away from our appointments.
Yeah.
I was saying, was there a way to add to our appointments to have that neutrality?
Correct.
I will tell you what most boards do if they go with a committee of this nature. They will look at, the board will all agree, we want a teacher representative there.
Parent.
We want a parent PTA. We want an administrator. Okay. We want a educational support professional group person there. We want the mayor of Kissimmee, we want the mayor of St. Cloud, so whatever it is. The board kind of says, these are 5 organizations we want represented on this committee. That gives you 5, 2 more from each board member.
Correct.
That's 2 for you to pick, that's 10, that's 15. So that's a very workable group, but if, in the absence of this board saying, we want at least these 5 groups represented, then would you go 3 apiece and just kind of let the chips fall where they may?
I actually like your idea a little better. There's a little bit more.
thought behind it, instead of just random people, like we have like a standing committee based on stakeholders that we believe are important. I mean, you've listed some of them already. And then we each select, what did we say, 2?
I'd say 2.
Yeah, because I think that makes it a little
It's a
bit more
compromise.
neutral
I
than.
wasn't taking away from our
So the
appointments.
union, who else did you mention?
Like teacher, like say a teacher.
The teachers union would send someone. Would that be your executive director? I mean,
Whomever they choose.
whoever.
Okay.
Teachers union, your educational support professionals. You talked about a Teamsters group. You could have somebody there, and you want to have somebody from your administrators association or an administrator, whether it be a high school principal,
Okay.
Most school boards go to the school level because they don't want to put a district level administrator in a difficult situation.
That means you
So-
would need elementary, middle, high. You would need a facet from every one of the areas.
Right,
to
you
have
would.
input.
So if you wanted would you want a teacher from the high school, a middle school principal? It's just, that there's some groups that you would say, here are the 6, 7 people we have to have on this group. And then your other 2 that you appoint, do you let that kind of get into the, again, PTA group? You gotta have PTA in there, I think.
Or parent group somehow.
But parent-
It
some
may
parent
not be the
group may not
PTA.
be.
Right, so you might have 7 or 8 people that you say, these are the 7 people we gotta have. And then if you went with 2 more per person, that's where you look at, okay, I want this civic leader. I want the student in the dropout prevention program who's gonna graduate after going through all this. You pick two folks that you want on there. And that would give you, 15 to 17. And I will say this too, real quick. We certainly would need email addresses for these folks, because I would be
And phone numbers.
communicating with them, phone numbers. They must commit to two nights is what we'll have.
Right.
And the concept, if you're looking at going in this direction, is we identify these 17, 16, 17, 18 people. We notify them of their requirements of sunshine. They will be covered by sunshine. So they're going to have to take that seriously.
Typically, Mr. Kruppenbacher and I would do a sunshine Zoom meeting with them all.
Okay.
Just putting your heads up on that.
Right. So as you talk to these potential people, they must commit to 2 nights,
And we'll have the dates, so they know exactly when they would
2
be.
dates. They must commit to participating in the sunshine training. Some of the civic people will say, look, I've been through government people. You might, again, if you pick someone in local government, they might say, I know about sunshine. I don't want to participate. They need to participate. They may not know it all, honestly, so they must participate. The process will work this way. Once we open up the advertisement window, and the first completed resume that I receive, application, would be the cover letter, the resume, 3 letters of reference, and the college transcripts. If that's all collected, then I put it in one PDF in the same order: cover letter, resume, 3 letters of reference, and transcripts. I would send that to either Tanya for dissemination to the board, so you get it, or Dana, whoever y'all want. And then we would request the next day after the board gets it, that it be posted to the website, your portal, so people can keep up with what's going on with the superintendent search. I, at that point, would then send that resume to these 15 or 16 committee members. Be looking at it at our first meeting. I have a lot of instructions. I will give them a lot of updates, but they'll come to that first meeting after the ads close, and say you have 26 applications. They'll come to the first meeting ready to pare those 26 applications down to the top half, 10 or 12. This is first glance. They'll come and talk about them at the first meeting, have discussions, and then we ask them to come back to bring back another group for further consideration by the board. That could be 8 to 12. It could be 5 or 6, depending on what the committee says.
And depending on the applicant pool.
On the
Yeah, if there were like a lot of close
Right.
ones, if there's like a big
And
disparity.
we basically say, look, if you're debating whether these people should go to the board or not, send them to the board. You want more than you want less. So let's say that this committee might send to the board 9 people, 8 people, 7, 11 people for your further consideration. And we tell the committee members, the board has a right to reject anyone you send. They have a right to add an applicant that you didn't. So know that up front. So then that way you get their input from that group. After that, after they make the selection to send a group forward for your further consideration, we then basically have you release them from sunshine and it's over with. That's what they do.
Right. Now,
We usually run the meeting. We don't necessarily
No.
recommend that you select a chairman or anything of the meeting. We go ahead and just run the
More
meeting.
about that meeting.
Now, I guess on the final part of that, when we, let's say they narrowed it down to like, say, 5 or 6 they like, without ranking it, just saying, hey, these are your folks, that's kind of our job to do that part. What do you recommend for, because at some point, when we look at them, and I say, I like top 3, Arguello says, well, I got a top 4, I got a top 2. Who do we, because I don't want to interview just 1 or 2 people. Do you know what I mean? Like to do a physical interview. But also I don't want 7 people flying in without the real option of getting chosen to be the superintendent. What is that number that we should ask for, after that selection process has been narrowed down, for us to request an actual physical interview?
I think the typical number that we've seen boards select is anywhere from 3 to 5.
Okay.
And what might happen is, let's say you have your committee, let's say they bring forward, what number did you give, 9 to 11, whatever, 9 to 11. You may, the night that that information is presented to you, here are the 9 or 11 names that the committee believes the board ought to continue to consider. Let's assume you say, yep, these are the 9. You don't take another one, which the board has the right to do, or you don't reject one, which the board has the right to do. Yep, the board says these are the 9 we'd like to continue to consider. Then, I think I mentioned this before, we work with you to find one question, each of you, that is your sort of deal breaker question. We ask that question of those 9 people. They become your semifinalists, right? Those 9 people have a week to respond, some video responses,
video.
some
Yeah,
written
I gotcha.
responses.
Yes.
You get all that back in on those 9 people. Then you come back after the responses have been shared with the board. You've had a few days to view the videos, read the written responses, and then the board gets together and says, all right, who do we as a board think we need to bring in for an interview?
Gotcha.
And we don't say you need to have 2, 3, 4, whatever. We say, let's look at who the board thinks they ought to continue to consider. And we try, as we've already mentioned, we try to keep the pool larger rather than smaller as long as you can. So in theory, let's say there's those 9 applicants. And let's say when we first go through it, Erica says, I'd like to continue to see applicants number 3, 5, 7, 9. And Heather says, well, I like 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then you say 3, 5, 9, 10. And then, so we go around and we look at who you all want to continue to consider. Well, clearly 3 and 5,
Or on there.
everyone seems to agree you want to bring in 3 or 5. Can we agree we're going to bring in candidates 3 and 5? All 5 of you said you wanted to see them. Yep, so we moved them over here. So we have 2 that we know we want to bring in, 3 and 5. Now, 3 of you picked applicant number 7. Do we believe we ought to bring in applicant 3 and 7? Well, I can do math, and I see that 3 out of 5 is a majority, so probably you would want to bring in applicant number 7, right? Then we look at, all right, some of these applicants only had 2 board members who wanted to bring them in. Let's look at them. Do the 2 of you who wanted to bring in applicants 9 and 10 or whatever want to advocate on behalf of your applicant? And John might see something in the applicant's background that the rest of you missed or whatever, or Terry might see something, and then you guys go, you know what, okay, sure, let's bring that applicant in as well. So now we have a pool of 3, 5, 7, 9, so there's 4 over here. Then there's going to be a few of the applicants, if you have the 9, that maybe only have 1 board member that wants to bring them in. Well, we see we already have 4 or 5 over here that we've all kind of said, yep, let's keep them in the pool. Do you really want to fight for the ones that only one of you said? Well, it depends. You may have a very strong reason why you would want to advocate for that, and so we give you that opportunity. But you may also say, I feel confident with this group over here. I'm not gonna necessarily fight for that. So then we have whatever this number is, 4 that you want to bring in for interviews. So that's how we whittle that down.
Andrew and I,
Andrew, one of the things I need to check with the AG on is, since the board will be giving some form of delegated authority to a committee, once they are appointed, you all may not be able to speak to them.
I believe that is correct. That's how we've always operated.
That's
It's a
the way I'm
sunshine
reading it,
issue.
Right, meaning, even though you're not on the committee, you can't talk to the committee members.
Once we release them from
Yeah,
sunshine,
I just want to confirm that.
thank
back up.
you. Yeah, that's how we operate.
Right.
And it goes back to the transparency piece. We'd rather fall on the side of caution than fall on the side of somebody making an accusation that legally is okay, but in the eyes of it's the Barstool test.
The reason I raised it, I had a superintendent search where they created a committee, and 2 board members tried to basically tell their appointees how they were to vote on the applicants.
That's an interesting, yeah. We subscribe to your theory of thought on that, sir.
Can we, instead of, well, not instead of, but in addition to, I guess, the transcripts, get like evaluations, especially if there's former superintendents? To me, that would be far more valuable than their transcripts, assuming that you guys did the background check.
But some evaluations are confidential for a period of time, and in some states, they are confidential.
It's not like Florida. Every state's not like Florida.
But I would imagine it would be waiverable according to the evaluee, Like they would.
If they want to choose.
It's not as easy as you think.
No.
We've tried.
We had that in fact, New York, we had a real problem.
Yeah,
We couldn't- we
you
could never
basically
get it.
had to pretty much do a full-fledged personnel records request in New York to get a copy of assessments and the potential discipline record even that we became aware of. So I think for fairness and consistency, because we don't want to give one candidate an advantage over the other because of maybe a state statute that would prevent him or her from providing an evaluation. Now, as we get toward the end, it's just consistency is what we try to treat every applicant fairly and ask them to provide the same identical stuff, so you're looking at the same stuff. If there would be one of your even semifinalists who had a statutory limitation on what they could provide for a certain period of time, then I think you might put that person at a
Unfair disadvantage.
unfair disadvantage.
But that's still a good thing to look into, though. Because I would like for your own legal, Frank, if you can, look into that. Because like you said, a state may be able to protect it. But if I want to waive that and say, hey, I don't mind showing it, there's a different story there. Because I think an evaluation does, because I have a business too. And everyone puts on the resume, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. But sometimes when you look at the evaluation, you can see things like, hey, they met this or they didn't meet that. You know what I mean? I think it tells us an important part of the story.
Simply tell the applicants they have to authorize the release of their evaluations.
Yeah.
But that in itself is a challenge for us to get it. If they don't.
I think it might be an option at the time the board says, okay, these are the 7 people or 8 people we got from.
When we narrow it down and say you're more
Narrow it
serious.
down.
Respond to these questions in writing and video.
And please provide the most
Provide a
recent.
copy of your
Yeah,
most recent
I like that.
application.
Because them saying, no, I don't want you to see my performance evaluation kind of speaks volumes too. Or are they willing to
That's a good
disclose
idea.
it?
Could we ask them that we get it certified from the agency? I've been in a situation where the evaluation was doctored and wasn't the official evaluation.
That's another, we could do that, but I'm not sure about, just like transcripts. That's why we only ask for copies, but before the final person is hired, we get official, because you can't get official transcripts. I don't know if anybody of you
That
tried. I
quickly.
mean, it's a problem.
I
That would
think
be the only problem.
asking for some kind of certified copy at no fault of the applicant,
Right.
if it has to come from an HR department in New York, it's going to take a month to get it. I'll just tell you that right now.
I think that's worth waiting. I mean,
Well,
it's hard to put someone in the position of running a school district of this size without having checked their evaluation.
Can we ask for it as, like, when they're the finalist? Because that would put over a month cushion, right?
Yeah, exactly. Once
Yeah.
you're finalist,
We can certainly ask for it if that's what the board wants us to do.
Yeah.
but not as a part of the initial screening process. Once we
right.
kind of narrowed it down, and that way we're more seriously concerned.
We can ask for a copy of an evaluation, and we may have to say, if you are offered a position, the final candidate will need to provide a certified copy. So like, they could give you a copy, but it may not be certified, because as John said, the turnaround, and you say a month is worth waiting for, and I'm not disagreeing that you would maybe want to see something, but we're saying a month. That's our priority calendar, not theirs, and it could be 6 weeks. So do you wait 2 more weeks before you make your decision? And then they say, well, oh yeah, we meant to get that out, but
Or if they're applying
It
to
could be
Manatee
another
County,
month
now
and
some
another
Manatee
month. We
County
just-
stole our
we
top
can't
candidate.
control those deadlines.
You bring up a good point. There are 6 superintendent openings in the state of Florida, and the number of applicants is not what it used to be. So, just keep that in mind.
I think we hear clearly that it's important to you.
Evaluation, go to Manatee.
There you go.
But I like that idea. I can
I like
compromise
that.
with that
They get
too.
it
So the
certified, yeah.
finalists, we request it, doesn't have to be a certified copy, but hopefully you think they have integrity. Because if they get down to the
Listen,
final.
if
and
they
find
give
out
you
it's
a
not-
false
Then you're not a good
evaluation,
person.
we got other problems.
Right.
And it has to be a more recent valuation too.
It'll be their last evaluation is what we would say.
Right.
And I will say, just so you're aware, that if you adding this advisory committee basically will add some time to your search timeline. And basically, we're adding about, just by having this group, it's going to add about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks
So
to your
can we
timeline.
decide today what are the stakeholder groups
Yeah.
besides the appointed?
Yeah, we're gonna go through all that.
And then, just so you know, we're going to ask that, we're going to ask a few more sort of questions that are going to help drive the timeline, so that John can then come up with a draft timeline to get to you guys to review and approve.
Oh, yes,
And
one
I
question.
think for just record purposes, because we are under time, I think one of them we said it was at least one teacher, one ESP, one Teamster, one admin, and one PTA.
And one
One
what?
student.
Parents.
Yeah, per parent, yeah, one parent, and then maybe one student. as
And is
well.
the teacher going to be a union-specific person appointed? So we don't have a representative of the union in there?
Ideally, they're union. and
I
if
think that the
somebody- if
union should
somebody
appoint
wants-
the teacher.
Yeah, the union should
Ideally,
appoint a
I would like to
teacher.
hear from a teacher that's not in the union,
Not
though.
every teacher is.
Ideally, if we can have both, it's fine, but ideally, that voice is never here.
Correct.
I think if you're instructional staff.
Yeah.
You qualify to be on the committee.
Okay,
Right.
so maybe
But I
one.
think, for expediency purposes, just to kind of like narrow it down so it don't take forever, I think it's easier because the union has an organization in place. And if we want somebody who's a non-union teacher, or you want a middle school, then each board member can appoint who they want. You know what I mean? So that board member can appoint the
Yeah, that's
roles.
true.
You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like, if you really want a
If you want a teacher
non-union
that's not in the
teacher,
union, you
appoint a
can appoint
non-union
one.
teacher. If you want a middle school teacher, appoint a middle school teacher. So they get, each one of the unions gets their voice and gets their representation. And
I
then each
understand,
two of
but I
us.
feel like the union now has an outsized voice. And
Remember, it's just a
then
recommending body.
up to us to give a voice to the
Other folks that are not represented.
But the
And
union
that's-
won't be represented if they're not on this committee.
Yeah, if they don't
But
live
they
it, then
can
there's a
be.
possibility they're
I'm
not.
saying that they absolutely can be, but I don't think that I want to budge on having, as a standing person, someone who is not a union instructional staff. Me personally. I don't know what the rest of the board says.
I didn't understand that.
I
It's
think,
not like-
I think it's great to have, the union has to be included, of course, great, I don't mind that, but one of those categories has to be filled by an instructional staff that's not a union member.
Okay, so 2 teachers then?
Okay,
Sure.
and I guess we're
That
gonna
would make
I
it
mean,
17
that's-
anyways.
What do you think? I mean, this is,
So-
I'm,
Yeah, and that's 17. is-
According to what you
Yeah, the
just
rest
said,
of this.
so you have one
Okay.
teacher, non-union, one union representative, whoever they appoint, one ESP representative, one Teamster, one admin, one PTA, one student, and one parent.
You said somebody from the business.
So PTA and parent are 2 separate groups?
I
said
mean,
PTA.
you just mentioned,
No, no,
PTA for
parent.
me was one parent, so it's the same thing, so.
Okay, okay.
So PTA parent.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, because you said parent separately.
And
I
that
didn't know
makes,
if that
and
meant
that
two.
makes a group of 17. So,
Right, Each two.
6, 7, plus 10, two
Yeah.
appointees
Two
per board
appointees,
member.
yes.
So
and there are
we-
2 appointees, and you can appoint whoever you like, yeah.
Okay.
we have some
John?
conversations here happening, well, I'm having a casino, I'm not sure if anybody else wants to have one. But apparently, we have some blind spots.
How are you picking the non-union teachers?
I was going to get to
Yeah,
that.
we gotta
Yeah,
get to,
yeah.
yeah, the
But
same thing, the
also-
student, the parent, everybody.
And also, there's not a PTA organization for the district.
District-wide.
So how are you picking that one parent?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of these that need to be
I-
picked.
Hold on, Erica was trying to say
Well,
something.
just to make the basic shell first, part of the other pieces you had mentioned was having, like, say, the mayor or from the different cities, or what other pieces of the committee in general, because that's internal. All of that is internal except for the parent. But what about the other pieces? Like, what were the other examples you
Some
said?
chambers,
Right. When you have smaller districts, and say there's two municipalities, both of those mayors were part of the board's agreement. You gotta have both mayors on it. They had two chambers, okay, chamber presidents, we gotta have those two people. You know, not have them, you pick those people to be on your group. And you have your 4 or 5 union people, that's now up to maybe 10 people. So does that cut your selection down?
And does each board member only get one?
The issue
Yeah.
with that, if I may, Julius, is that now you're making it not a community thing. Now it's basically, we might as well just decide who the superintendent is going to be ourselves. So, I mean, the mayor certainly,
These are
if
all
I may.
community members.
well, some of them, not all of them, right? But any one of you, you have 2 appointees, so why not
You can
with these
put that
people,
in.
you can appoint the chamber, person from the chamber, president of the chamber, somebody from the business world. The whole point, was the community input, right? So it wasn't supposed to be the world's largest CEO and the mayor and the county commissioner, and otherwise we might as well just decide for ourselves that we're just gonna pick the superintendent amongst us right now, and not do it at all. So if we put in all the big shots who call all the shots in Osceola County, I don't think that that's necessarily fulfilling the intention of involving the community. Now we're just making it all the people who make the decisions regardless.
No, I kind of agree but disagree. I do agree that they can be on the committee, but it shouldn't be a standing part of the committee. If somebody believes that they should
Yeah,
be on there,
absolutely.
they just make it as one of their appointees. And that's the whole point of being a board member, being elected, that you have a good logical reasoning for who you appoint and who you want to make that
Well, I do
recommendation.
think, Erica, one of the things I heard her say was, you do need to pay attention to, if you have two teachers, an ESP, a Teamster, admin, and student,
Right.
that number is 6, and those are considered the internal stakeholders. You do want to make sure that there's a balance between internal and external stakeholders. So for example, even if each of you were getting 2 appointees,
Right.
if Heather appoints 2 internal stakeholders, now you're up to 8, and then let's say you appoint 1 internal
That's like my
stakeholder.
pastor of my church. He's not a teacher and he's not an ESP, and that's a community member that I value input from and I think is important here. And so I'm not just saying chamber or elected in other areas, it's the other members are of our community too.
For sure, and that's exactly why the appointment is
Right.
important, but you do need to make sure, if you have a majority of internal stakeholders, I will tell you, the criticism will be
There's
that
nobody from the-
it was an inside job. That, you just need to be aware.
That's what I'm trying to
This is
prevent,
one
but
of
in
the
Osceola County, the
challenges-
mayors are on
This is
the
one of the
inside.
challenges with the committee, and that's why I think this is very good discussion. Because how you get on the committee.
Because I would appoint 2 external people, because if I know it's
I would
internally
appoint 2
stacked, I
external
would appoint 2.
You would
That's
not?
exactly
Are you-
right.
No, I would.
Pardon?
So are we
I would
making
absolutely.
that part of the process then?
If we have mostly internal standing members, and that means that we can only appoint external stakeholders.
Not only, there's 17, so that would be 6 that were internal.
So the-
That's what she's saying.
That's right.
She's saying, are the 2 appointees by each board member, are we saying that those appointees should be external appointees? A pastor, a parent,
I think it should be whoever that.
They can whoever that person
wants.
appoints, man.
I
Then if you-
understand,
but then if you-
however, if we're, give me 1 second
I
to
know what
finish
you're
my
gonna
thought.
say.
The challenge is, and I see it clearly what Mrs. Booth is saying, we're going to have an outsized voice dictating who moves forward. We need to make sure that there is all of the stakeholders in our community. And I do agree that some of those stakeholders may include chamber members, for example, whatever. I mean, that's not the point. The point is that we have to ensure that this committee is not leaning one side or the other just based on their life experiences or the experience that they bring with them into that conversation. So if these standing members are all going to be internal, we have got to have a mechanism to ensure that we have enough external, diverse voices in that conversation.
Or we can sit there and
So-
say at least one of your appointments has to be external.
And the chamber really is already represented because one of us sits on the board of the chamber already. So, I mean, and you're what, a school board
The
member?
point isn't the chamber, it's just external in general.
So I think I can, because right now, everyone says 6, I count it 8, because there's just 1 student, 1 PTO, which is a parent, like say 2 teachers, 1 union, 1 non-union, 1 ESP, 1 Teamster, and 1 admin. That's 3, 4, 5, 6, oh, 7. Wait, I've got 1, 2, 3.
I have
4, 5,
7.
6, 7. I have 7. Correct. And then if there's 2 appointees per each board member, that's 10, so that's 17, which is not too big of a number, not too small of a
Yeah.
number. And I'm willing to concede to Ms. Castillo's point, where if we have 2 appointees, we have to at least guarantee that one of them is external. So that way, and whoever that is, I don't want to put a limit on what external means. It could be a chamber, it can be a whatever, but just one person who's not in the schools.
But you
still
run the
can
risk of
have
11 being internal then.
Internal.
And that's okay. That's not that bad. I mean, that's not,
Then, that's okay, but it's gonna draw a flag, I can tell you.
Do, I mean, is there cause for concern where some of those would overlap as considered internal though? Like someone
Yeah.
that I appoint as an external person might have a husband or a wife that works internally, or a child that go, like they're kind of
I
going
think it's
to
okay. I think
meld
it's
that
okay.
line of
That's fine with us,
internal.
we just wanna point this up,
Yeah,
because
and-
that's one of the
I think we're talking
challenges.
about full-time employees being internal,
Okay.
full-time
Yeah,
employees.
Okay.
So the
Well,
parent.
then the parent is not.
Correct, the parent
so they're
doesn't,
not
I don't
part
see the
of-
parent as being an internal.
Correct.
Correct.
Correct, okay.
and so I think that's a good compromise. You know what I mean? So I get, we used to have one external, because don't forget, that's just one external. Some people, some board members may appoint 2 externals, and so it's not going to be an exact number. And we try our best, and internal stakeholders, there's a cross-section of internal stakeholders too. It's not like, okay, there are 5 teachers or 2 whatever, it's a cross-section with people who have different experiences at the district too, that they're bringing to the table. And at the end of the day, they're just an advisory role. At the end of the day, we're the ones making the final decision. So,
They are
they're
made
just-
very clear of
Yeah,
that.
they're very, so it's not like, okay, somebody's tipping the hat to anything, they're just giving the recommendations and justifying the recommendations. At the end of the day, we still have to vote on what we believe is the best person for that final decision. And I think that's.
What are your thoughts?
I just want, and I want all the community, not, that was big for me, it's just not the internal drives it all. Because if we want to make change, we need to hear from everyone what they want. And so
Yeah.
it's hard to hear from everyone when you narrow it down and you have to pick certain people. To compromise with because I feel like we need more input, but,
But I think one way to listening to Erica's point is that committee, when they meet, they're not in private too. They can be in a public meeting.
It must be.
And at the end of that meeting, you can have like public input.
We
So
always
say
have
somebody
open
wants
for
to come
public comment on
in,
the
they can have
Okay,
public
that-
comment,
okay.
and they can still
Yeah.
influence.
It's a sunshine meeting, so they
Yeah.
have to allow for
So
public.
it's not like it's only that committee in a vacuum. You know what I mean? The public, anybody can show up to that meeting and give their 2 cents to what they believe.
That's
And
true.
We always have public input prior to the meeting, because we don't want it after the end of it, where the committee has already made.
Made a decision, yes.
So we always ask for public input up
Correct.
front.
And everyone should be invited to that. I think everyone should get that invitation of when those public meetings are. And that way, if they are part of a chamber or part of something or Rotary Club, that they get to actually, and like you said, put the public comment in the beginning.
So let me make sure I understand and let me make sure everyone agrees, okay? As the foundation of the committee, meaning these spots are identified for specific stakeholder groups. There would be, the union could select a teacher and send that person forward. There's a non-union teacher, which you're going to have to ask, we have to discuss how that person would get selected. The ESP group would send somebody forward. The Teamster group would send somebody forward. The admin group would send somebody forward.
Right.
We have to figure out how we're going to bring a parent, how we're going to identify the parent who represents, and we have to identify how you're going to bring the student. Those would be the sort of non-negotiables. All of these people these positions have a seat at the table, right? Then each board member can appoint 2 people of your choosing, at least one of whom must be considered an external, meaning non-full-time employee, and everyone's okay with this as I've just described it. I see a yes, I see a yes, I see a yes. Okay, now, let's talk about how we're going to determine the non-union teacher.
Okay, I think just based on that, we could do all 3 of them the same. Since they're standing, I believe that we could put out like an application process, just like we do with the Business Advisory Board, saying, hey, anybody who's a member of the PTA who wants to participate, submit your names forward. Same thing with the non-union teacher. We just sent out an ad, not an ad, but, a solicitation.
socials?
Yeah, through the socials or through whatever, or through Danny's office and say, hey, apply if you want to apply. And then the board, at the next board meeting, we just come to a consensus, the majority on who they.
Okay, but now let's ask about that consensus. Let's say you get
That means
50 parents. Let's say you get 100 parents. Are you going to get consensus, or are you going to just randomly select someone?
I think it has to be just random selection at that point. I don't know how we narrow down. We've got the number of parents we have, the number of students we have. How do you pick one to hold that
Oh, it's a
seat?
random.
Dana's got a thought.
Dana?
Not all schools have a PTA, so be careful with how.
Parent.
I think we're just saying parent,
Or
just parent,
SAC
just
committee. Or
parent,
SAC
not,
committee, or.
no, just parent.
They don't even have to be a member of
Can I
that, I
ask
would.
Mr. Kruckenbacher a question?
Yeah.
What about purposely trying to select a non-union teacher?
If you, I'd look at your teachers of the year.
There you go.
Ooh.
What about the teacher?
Oh, yeah, and we've always had them do
Okay.
certain.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
Are we sure that the teacher of the year is a non-union teacher?
No, we've got to
you
find at
check
least
it out.
one. I mean,
Okay.
Find one that was your teacher of the year.
Okay, okay.
And we'll just go down to the finalists. If the winner didn't get it, we'll look at the finalists as like the
teacher of
second
the year.
choice.
Okay, that's a thought.
Okay, now Dana would research that. Now the student, how are we gonna pick the student?
Dana, did you hear that? Teacher of the year. We'll pick from teachers of the year, past teachers of the year, for a non-union teacher.
Who is gonna pick and how many years back do you want?
We won
first-
5 years back.
Just the finalists?
I think just go the first one back that
Go the-
is not a teacher, union teacher.
Yeah, the
Like,
first.
the first one you
Who's the
find that
current
was not a
teacher of the
union
year?
teacher.
And then you're gonna have people saying, well,
Taylor
why you only
Hewitt is
pick teacher of the year?
a teacher of the year.
Well, there's always gonna be something, yeah. I'm not.
There's
always
always,
first.
there is going to always be something.
Are you sure that, are you comfortable with saying I wanna pick a non-union teacher?
I
As far
am.
as they're not,
I
I know, I
am.
am now with that, but as far as
Our-
the
our
question.
teachers are not
Okay,
fully
he is all right,
union.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
As
No, I
long as
agree.
we're not getting
Yeah,
in
okay.
trouble.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's what he's
That's
asking.
what I'm
Are we
asking.
getting in trouble?
No, 53%
Then I don't care.
of your employees.
Okay, good, okay, I just wanna make sure you're not getting in trouble, like, by
A
advertising.
whole other
or-
half that doesn't belong.
Because
Yeah.
of that percentage, that's why that's important.
Yeah, if
Yeah,
we
I
had
agree.
90%
I'm
of teachers
fine
in
with it.
the
I just
union,
wanna
then it
not
wouldn't
get
be
in
an
trouble
issue.
with
but, you know.
What's
So
the percentage?
Dana will
53.
identify that
53% are
first.
in the
Teacher year,
union.
fine.
So we have
Get in
a
trouble.
All right, Dana, you got some pressure on you for that.
Andrea, if anybody complains, we'll forward them to Ron DeSantis to deal with the issue.
There we go.
So the parent, how do we do random, I like the idea of random selection, I can support that, but how does that look like? Is it like all the names in there get spun in a wheel and we pull out a number, like what's the mechanism to do random selection?
Do you have a thought on that, Dana?
Do you want me to give you the top? We can check to see if the current teacher of the year right now is a union member. That might be an easy
Gotcha,
selection.
that's an easy one.
We're recognizing actually tomorrow, I think, going out surprise visiting the top 10 new teachers of the year finalists. We can go through there and pick and let you know, and then I don't want to make the decision, but I don't know how we would make that decision.
I would say, and this is a suggestion, if of the 10 finalists, the teacher of the year happens to be in the union, but there are 4 finalists who are not union members, you would put their names in a hat and draw one. That's what I think is the
During the
best.
school board meeting.
Andrea?
Correct, you can do it during a school board meeting. That's fine.
Or first of all, you would ask the 4 if they want to participate, rather than obligate them.
So for the-
No, I mean, they gotta
Three women
submit,
wanna
yeah,
do it.
I
So
would-
for
I
the
would say they
parent
gotta
one, I
confirm
think
that
we
beforehand.
could do like a form on the website where parents submit saying, I want, that would turn into a spreadsheet, and there are tools out there, those little random wheel selectors that teachers use in class to pick, and we just random wheel it
So
and pick
Dana
a
would run
parent.
that one too.
The key, though, the most important thing is, we're gonna need the calendar, because whoever gets selected has to commit to these dates. So even the 4 teachers of the year who may not be in the union, you may only have 1 who can commit to these dates, and then that would be the one.
Yes.
Or the parents, before they apply, because you could, like Mr. Kruppenbacher even suggested, you could just take all the SAC members' names and throw them in a hat.
No,
But they wouldn't all necessarily be willing to serve
I think it has to
or
be someone that comes forward
function.
and
And
says, I
to
want to be on
Terry's-
this committee.
To Terry's point, there are parents
That
that
are
we
not.
want input that can't do SAC, and we don't want to exclude.
Correct.
Well, that's when
parents.
they'll have to come in also do during our community forums that we're gonna host and things like that.
And they can also fill out the survey. There's a number of different opportunities for some of them. But the parents who are interested, if you do an all-call, here's 1 week, any parent who would like to serve on the superintendent search committee advisory team, or whatever we decide to call that person, here are the dates you need to make sure you're available. If you're interested, please submit your name, your child's name, the school your child attends, blah, blah, blah. All names will be gathered, and at a board meeting, they'll, be a drawing.
I can agree with that. And then however random, and like, so there's some computer program or
Have
something
them,
like
you
that.
upload
We
the
could just do the
worksheet.
selection at the board meeting. We
Spreadsheet.
can, they can hit the button, the computer will generate.
However you guys want to work that through, we can find a way to do that.
Okay.
And then the student,
I think the students, same way. Students submit, they want to do it. They have the dates, same thing as parents, and then randomly select a student.
I will tell you this, sometimes the students are more diligent at community participants than some of the adults.
Do you want to at least, I know you don't want to exclude too much, but just to kind of narrow it down, I don't mind rewarding students. Do you want them to say, hey, they're part of their student government?
They already,
Yeah.
voice is already here. That's the
Student committee that he's talking to.
On Friday.
Yeah.
Just learned, though, that that committee is not only the student governments. Is that correct, Dana? The
Correct.
committee I'm meeting with. Tell, who else is on that committee?
We asked the schools, the high schools, to pick two students and not to be the top tier students.
Okay, good.
So that seems to help.
So it's not the student council president of every school.
Not necessarily, no.
That helps, if not.
So based on the description we've just had, is there anything that anyone is uncomfortable with the selection of those set members? Okay, so start thinking about who you may want to appoint, but you don't even need to start talking to them yet until we get some dates. John,
Right.
what other directives do we need from the board so that we can start to build a timeline?
Okay, so we want to have, how many community forums that are open to come one, come all?
5.
One per district?
I mean, that's Terry. I don't know what everybody else thinks. I think it should be 5, 1 per district.
I think they should be out visited.
Yeah,
just
in the area, in the different
Such
areas.
a large county, yes,
5?
landmass wise.
And it can almost be at the same time, so we're not losing time. It just that,
No, because their team orchestrates.
oh, because you
it,
can't be at
so-
each one. Oh, okay.
Now, also,
That's 5 days.
And that's probably going to extend the time frame a little bit as well. But we'll try to condense it as much as possible. I did hear, though, that typically at community forums, because of parents having to get students maybe after school, young ones from daycare, things of that nature, get home, get everybody dinner and so forth, we usually start them at 6 p.m. And we typically like to have them at a high school in the area, in the 5 areas, in the media center. So we'll need to kind of work with Dana, I guess, to get the high schools, is the cafeterias, I mean, the media center is open for that time. I did hear about maybe different times other than 6.
I just threw it out there, and if that's the case, then maybe, like, so say I'm District 5, furthest east, maybe the district next to mine, you could do like morning and evening, so if the parent, they don't have to drive like all the way to the other side of Queen Sienna.
Oh, that same day, like it, instead of having it.
No.
Just another
I mean, I guess it
opportunity.
could be.
No, I'm talking about for them, like if they're gonna be here,
It could be
they
the
can do
same
one in the
day.
morning and one
So
in the
this
evening.
isn't, the way that it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, this isn't a forum for only District 1. It is just
Anybody can
one
go.
anyone can
held,
go.
which
Anybody can go
means
to any of them.
if she has one in the morning, then
I
you
could
can
have it
have
in
one
the
in
evening.
mid-afternoon, you can have one at 4, you can have one at 6, I can have one at whatever time, so that if a parent can't make that time, they can come here. You know what I mean? That's what she means. Does that make sense?
What time would be a good time for you?
Morning times, what
Morning
time?
time.
10?
10.
I would say 10 if any parents that are getting their kids to school and then have availability after.
So
Which district
at least
would
one
that
forum
be?
at 10 a.m.?
Which forum would that be then, next year's? Usually be at 6.
I'm full, since I'm central, I mean, maybe a central location would be
10
good for a
o'clock.
morning time, so I think District 4 would be fine
District
for a
4.
morning time.
Now, are we agreeing that 5 is the right number?
5 number,
5 number?
I think we're offering an area, in each of our districts, we're offering them a place to be.
I
Are
will
you
tell you this.
suggesting
you
more or
think-
less?
yeah.
No, I'm talking potentially less. When you said time constraints, I'm thinking geography, one on the west
Oh,
side,
I
one on
think
the east
5
side,
because
one
the
on the south.
district is so big. Yeah.
And it will, probably your high schools, if we do, say, 2 mornings at 10 or 3, I mean, with 5 forums, we'll have.
Like a perfect
2 or 3
example,
morning,
like
2
I'm willing to
in the afternoon.
cannibalize mine with hers, because I have Gateway High School. We have to, no, wait, oh, no, she's Gateway. No, somebody's
Okay,
Gateway.
I'm not
Okay, yeah, she's Gateway. The point is, Gateway's physically in 4, but the bulk of the parents live in my district. So I wouldn't mind sharing that, and that way it's down to 1 less that you have to do.
Yeah, but the point is.
Because mine is centrally located. So you can still have yours, but I'm willing to concede mine then. So if everyone wants to do 5, just for logistics purposes, me and Heather can share Gateway High School.
Well,
If she-
it's not for you or for your district necessarily, it's just making them in different areas of the district.
I know,
so
but
that
that's what I'm trying to say.
right?
But the areas in my district are so close. It wouldn't be worth it to have a 5th one. What, one in Gateway, what, Pass? They're like so close to each other. You're not creating a logistical,
Well, there's 3 locations that we really need to cover then, right?
like one definitely has to be in
There's-
Poinciana.
One is west, one is south, like Poinciana, that's the furthest south, right? And one in St. Cloud.
Right.
So that's like the triangle that we need to try to
And then
cover.
one in the center is the gateway, that's what I'm
And
trying to
then
say.
one in the center. I mean, you could do 4.
Yeah, so technically you do 4, that's what I mean. And I'm okay with conceding
He's
mine.
thinking of high schools, that's why. Our
schools.
high
I get
schools
it.
are close
I get
together,
it.
that we both cover.
We do
Okay,
one
so-
If
OA
they're saying
test.
high schools.
So Dana, we can put those two together at a high school at 6?
I say Gateway High School.
Okay, Gateway High School
Gateway
at
High
6.
School, Poinciana, St. Cloud, or would you go Harmony?
St. Cloud High School.
St. Cloud High School?
I would think, depending on where's the gate, because that's in town.
But for yours, you have to think
Yeah,
of
'cause
Toho,
Harmony, yeah,
Harmony,
right.
and-
There's no,
so I would say St. Cloud probably is
I
the
do have a new
most.
high school soon.
Not it, I'll be ready, yeah. I
Where would
say
the other
St.
one
Cloud.
be then?
Celebration.
Celebration, okay.
And usually we say high school because everyone knows where the high schools are.
Right.
It's easy transportation and they
Good
know.
Parking and everything like that.
Yes, exactly. Let me also speak to the issue of board members at these events. We discourage board member attendance for a number of reasons, not least of which is, A, you don't want to be accused of driving the conversation. B, you don't want to intimidate anyone's free conversation. In fact, typically at these events, we don't want to know who they are. If you're a teacher, it doesn't matter to me. If you're a parent, it doesn't matter to me. It truly should be sort of input that everyone feels is welcome and anonymous so that we get the most, so that the event is held with fidelity. So we typically will welcome them on behalf of the board, thank them for their commitment on behalf of the board, tell them here's the process of what's going to happen. The board will get this information, they'll use it to make their decision. Here are the times that you'll have opportunity for input. Look on the website so you can follow with the interviews. We give them sort of an overview so they know what's happening, how their input's going to be used. We also offer at every one of these sessions, Bill carries around some empty sort of, what do you call those things? Note cards.
Note cards.
And we leave them on the table. If anybody has someone that they believe would be a good superintendent, give us their name, give us their contact information, then we reach out to those people and say, hey, your name has been suggested as someone who might be interested and be a good, so we do the recruiting, based on if anybody has the information they'd like for us to receive specifically related to a candidate. It's 1 hour in and out. It's a very timed and official protocol, so parents who come know it is a 60-minute in and out. We'll start on time, we'll end on time. The information will then be summarized and provided to the board members. That's how we kind of run it, and all of them get the same questions so that all the information, then you're comparing similar information.
So discouraged, or we are committing to not go? Okay.
It's very difficult for us to
Now, can they be-
convince them
Yeah,
that they
no, I
have the
agree.
freedom to
Can we-
speak.
Can we televise them, that way we can watch it and see like people's opinions?
That would be up to your IT
We're
staff.
going to get the feedback from them.
You're going to get every written piece of
I'd
information.
like to see it I'd like to watch them too from
Just like a
afar.
Facebook Live or something like that,
Yeah.
or whatever.
That's-
Well, I will say that the way we do it, they talk in some small groups. It's a group conversation, and then they report out, and then there's some prioritization. So a Facebook Live you wouldn't hear. You wouldn't hear. What you would hear would be the summarization that they will be providing, because as this
Yeah, the
group
summary.
reports out, it gets logged, and we make sure that it's logged to their satisfaction, that we're not editorializing or leaving out a key element, that when we capture it, make sure we've captured it to your satisfaction. And then at the end of each session, so all these qualities will be listed that all the different groups have come up with. And there might be 5 pages, lists of qualities. Then we also kind of do the prioritization, where you have a dot and you get 3 dots and you get to place your dot on the one you think is most important. So for example, at Gateway High School, it might come out that the most important quality is having been a principal, let's say. But then at another location, it might come out that they've determined the most important is ability to communicate or whatever. So you'll see by location, in order, the number.
Okay,
Yeah,
I got you.
so
I see
this.
what you're saying. How they discuss it doesn't matter. The point is, they wrote down what their bullet points are.
Right, and we'll tell you, 37 people said this one, 24 people said this
That's
one.
fair.
So you have exactly the numbers.
Gotcha.
Right, and the sheets that we use, we turn into Dana too.
Yeah, it's public record.
They're all public records, so you'll have all that
Okay,
too.
I'm fine.
Yeah, ask a question now
Sure.
that I opened that can of worms about a morning.
Mhm.
Dana, was school in session and parking and all of those issues? I mean, if we come to where like a morning issue isn't a possibility, and you just can't get folks on your campus to do that, is maybe to look at another site or, I don't know, OHB or something to where like,
I think on campus is fine.
Okay.
The high schools will be ready.
Just
We'll
wanna be
know.
sure.
We'll make it very easy for the parents to come in,
Yes.
sign in, check their ID, and go right down. So I
okay,
think it's fine.
thank you.
Which one would you want to have the 4 o'clock?
4 o'clock?
Yeah. Or not the 4 o'clock, 10 a.m. We got Poinciana, Gateway, St. Cloud High, and Celebration.
John, I'm gonna step to the restroom,
Okay.
leaving you guys in charge for 2
Got
minutes. Don't make it go crazy.
Okay.
I
Don't
don't
lose
think it
us.
matters, Dr. Vogel.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
Board members, any particular?
I think Miss
I thought we had stayed,
Gahun
yeah,
said
Gateway?
central location would be, and I
Gateway?
agree with that,
Okay,
yeah.
great. 10 a.m.
That one's at
Gateway,
Gateway High School.
That's ours combined
Then-
together.
10?
10 a.m. Okay, that's great.
To have both, an AM and a PM.
You see, we may be able to
No.
have the,
No,
Just
just
the
one.
AM.
just one.
You
The
could-
PMs will be at theirs.
Aren't you gonna really exclude all the parents who work? We have a large.
That's what I was saying.
Well, no, but it's on the,
But that's
it's the
why
perimeter
we-
that we're gonna have them in the
The other
evening.
schools.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Really, they're
I think-
central.
That's why I
The
still
other
think
one.
Gateway still needs to have a PM, because they're the ones.
Then there's 5.
No, there's 4.
No, there's 5.
No,
If you're
4
gonna have an AM and a
locations.
PM.
Yes, I know, yeah, but they're gonna be here in the morning, and they could be here at night. It's just not an extra day.
Oh, so
Okay,
we're
well,
gonna do. two.
Everybody's under the
Longer day.
understanding that it's not this, it's
Okay, I
it was
thought we were gonna do
sessions,
that in place.
not locations.
Gateway's under construction, so we might have to do what, Neo City?
Yeah.
We do Neo City, that's fine. The actual location.
Paths, I don't know.
So
Whatever's easiest
now we're talking about
location-wise.
5 sessions.
We're back to 5, okay.
I thought that,
I thought it was just the one section.
yeah, because
ours.
you
I
can
did
have them
too.
throughout the day. So if you can't make one, make the other.
Honestly, I'll tell you, you're going to get more at 6 p.m.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, because if I had a choice, and we're just trying to accommodate
Offer
them.
one morning session somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, we're just maybe just one morning session.
The one in Poinciana is gonna have to be 6:30 at the
Yeah.
earliest,
Because of traffic?
Traffic to get in there.
if not 7.
Okay. About how many meetings again,
Bill?
what location?
7 really is better for Poinciana.
Yes.
7, okay. Okay, 7, Borg or Dana. So are we doing a 10 a.m. and a 6 at one location? Okay,
We're doing 6, combining their 2.
got it.
6
Gateway.
p.m.
Right.
No, that's the morning one. Theirs is the
That's
morning.
all I want to.
If we're offering a morning one, I thought we were doing it here.
That's what I
I
thought
mean,
we
if you
gave
don't
one.
think a
Because it's
morning one
centralized.
is
Yeah.
necessary, and if we need.
Yeah, I didn't mean the morning one to get rid of an evening one. We're just having one morning session just to allow people an opportunity to come to
Where's the
that.
morning session
Whatever school in our
Neo
combined
City.
districts is easiest for access.
What
Neo
about
City
having it
has-
not at 10 a.m.? What about having it 3 or something to that effect, right after school starts? So
Wait.
then we can do back-to-back. I'm just
When it
thinking about
ends.
logistics.
Well, I think the point is there's some community member that may not be able to make it at night,
Okay.
so that would be the morning
Okay.
session. I still think that we don't need 2 sessions in that location.
I agree with that.
Because we also have to think about like their schedules.
Right. But if I had a preference, then, because I guess if you live in the middle, in the center, and you want to be participating as a parent, you're not going to want to drive down to Poinciana, first of all, if you live in the middle. No one wants to drive that far to come back because the traffic is ridiculous. You'll get home super late. Then, so if I live in the middle in the Kissimmee, I'm either going to have to go to Celebration, which is really far as well, because there's really only 2 ways to get to Celebration. St. Cloud may be the one that's closest to me. I kind of prefer that one in the middle with Neo City, just because of logistics. And if they're only going to have one, then I think I'd prefer the night, because that's when you're going to have the highest amount of participation.
I'll have the morning one in celebration.
Okay, the morning of the
Yeah,
celebration.
morning will be in celebration.
Okay.
There, solved.
10 a.m. at celebration, 6 p.m. we're going to go to Neo City or we're going to go to Gateway?
Neo City Gateway's under construction.
Yeah, Neo City.
Oh, okay, great.
Saw that as I was driving in.
Yeah, that way it's not a
Same day.
pain when they get in there.
Good.
These are the same day?
We could do it the same day.
I think that's for us to propose with
Yeah,
Dana.
we'll talk with
Okay.
Dana, we'll set
Got it,
it
got
up.
it.
That sounds excellent, that's good.
And then you got 7:30 at the other one.
7:30 at Point Siena.
And then yours.
I would say 7.
7 o'clock at Point Siena. We hate to keep people up that late is a problem. That's why we like to do it at 6, but if we feel we need to do it at 7.
You're
not gonna get
there
there.
for you.
7, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, 7 will be fine at Point Siena, and then 6 at the other two?
Yes, it needs to be evening.
Okay.
Same
Yeah.
cloud.
Right. Okay, sounds good. Now, we also will have a survey.
Yep, that's the next topic.
Right. Okay. And
Dana has the one-question survey that we're going to use.
I'm sorry.
we have a one-question survey. Let's
Can
talk.
can you come talk to them
talk-
about?
Let's talk about the
these?
concept of the,
Do you have the question that we proposed?
we do.
Grab it.
We can grab it, yeah.
We have Thought Exchange, which is an online platform, and we can scale the question and scale the responses. So anybody, or if it's for a specific group, or it's open to all parents or all staff or anybody, we can put it on the website, people log in, just click on it, and then they get to write a response. And then what's neat about it is then anonymously you see all other responses and you get to rate it how you personally feel about different responses with a 1 star all the way up to 5 stars, which is the best. So you're better able to gauge and scale the feedback that way. So that's Thought Exchange. We can ask one question at a time.
And the thought is, the question could be, what are the challenges facing the next superintendent, and what are the qualities and qualifications that person will need
To overcome that challenge.
to address those challenges? So that's essentially we'll tweak it out a little bit, but that's the concept.
Dana, I have a question. You said you could target who participates in that question?
We could send a link, so if you wanted to say, we want all teachers in the entire school district to answer that thought exchange, we can send the link out, and so they go right to that link and do it. If you say, we want to ask a different question or the same question, then we can send a different link out with the same, so you can target the groups. We can send it out to, put it out there to all parents.
So we're seeing all parent feedback together, all teacher
We
feedback
can do it that
together.
way, yes.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Can we have the community response to that question? If they, and
The
you
same
could even
exact
ask,
question.
with which group do you most identify? Because I might be a staff member, but I also might be a community member, right? So
Yes.
if I'm a full-time staff, I might identify there, and then it would give me the staff. So you would see how the input on that one question differs from each group.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand that.
Yeah.
And we would do that in place of the overall survey.
We can do an overall survey. If you want to ask multiple questions, we can put a survey on our website. that
I like
anybody
the
can go
idea of the
to.
same questions to different groups and then see
Yeah,
what
I
each
like
group.
that. And I think it's a very thought-provoking question.
This is going to be something that we think is really exciting, and we have not done this elsewhere. We've used a traditional survey where people.
Well, there we go, leading the.
Absolutely.
Really, absolutely.
Already.
That's why you have a thought exchange, right?
That's right. What we've done is we have maybe 5 leadership areas or 5 areas strategic plan, and then they choose, the respondents choose 3 out of 10 or something to that effect. But to me, this captures, the question is the big thing. And I think, what are the challenges and issues? So if people have concerns, they can respond. And then what are the skills or the qualities that the person's going to need, or qualifications? And I
Now,
think
is
that's
it going to be like
good.
they totally write in the answer, or is there going to be
How
like
is
a
that, Dana?
drop-down menu of
They
like
write-
5, 6 different answers to
They
choose
write
from?
the answer,
Right.
and then, let's say we all did it, then you are invited to rate each one of the responses with a 1 to 5 star, and you don't know who did it.
So what you're
They're gonna see
saying,
other
so it's like a
people's
2-step survey?
Yes.
Just so I can understand it. So the first part is you write your answer. Then once all the answers are done, then you get back and then you look at the survey again a second time, you look at it and then you rate it?
So, it's not when it's done, because it doesn't, when it closes, it closes. So when you're in there writing your response, then you're gonna be invited to rate other responses that have come in. You are invited, if you want to come back later and rate more responses, that's absolutely fine. But when it's closed, it's closed.
So it's kind of like you get to see, because maybe you didn't think about something.
You go, oh, that's a great idea. I didn't even
And so
think
you
of
say,
that.
oh, that is a 5 to me, and so that's going to show priority. Or maybe you don't agree with someone on something, and you think that's
That's
not
not
a
an
quality
issue,
that
yeah.
we need. It's going to knock that one down lower
Correct.
and show that people don't think that is something.
Are you familiar with Reddit?
Not really.
Okay.
To me, this is really neat, and it's the first time anyone's tried to use it, but I think it's so much different, and I think it's going to give a lot of good information. And then what will each board member get at the end?
It will create its own PowerPoint, so we don't have to go in and analyze. It analyzes it with AI, and it puts all the groups. You're going to see what one scored the highest, what one scored the lowest. It creates a word cloud, what word was used so many times.
Because somebody might not write the same way, but they use the same buzzword or something.
Correct. It all links it all together. So you're going to see a full PowerPoint on responses. We could even let you see every single response if you want to read that.
I think it's a really interesting opportunity that we've not done before, but as Dana explained it and as I've asked questions and learned about it, I think you can really, the opportunity to rate other people's answers, because I would say this, but then when I read John's, let's say, I was like, oh my gosh, he hit it. He hit it better than I did. I can score his higher. And then as everybody else reads and says, yeah, John's is the right one, and the one I said really bumps to the bottom because, oh,
You
Andrea.
weren't eloquent in what you said.
Yeah, exactly. Or I missed it, or that's just a, if I said something like, the traffic pattern at the school is a problem, but the reality is that's just for you because you have an issue with the traffic pattern. It falls to the bottom as opposed to getting consent. It's really a consensus
I like that idea.
identifier.
Then I guess the other issue is just for purposes of getting things done a little bit, because it is getting late. What are the questions? Like, how many questions are going to be?
One question.
One question.
It's the one question.
One question?
Right, right.
Say it again, Bill. What are the challenges?
What are the challenges and issues facing the next superintendent, and what qualities and qualifications will that individual need to address those challenges?
So it's a pretty thought-provoking question.
Right, so they're going to have to identify it, and they're going to say what, and those are the things that we want to get out of it too. We want to find out what, and then we'll pull all of that data together.
Right. And to me, that's almost like two separate questions.
It is.
What is the biggest challenge, and then what are the qualifications to meet that challenge? I kind of would rather see it as two separate
Well,
questions.
we
'cause
try to do that.
don't wanna-
but you-
The problem is you can only ask
You
one
can only ask
question.
one question on that, so that's why we combine that.
So we could do two separate ones. We were trying to think about how could we use it for one.
Because I want people to identify what they are, because then it gets it gets kind of muddled. Because I'm like thinking, okay, I'm thinking about the biggest challenge, but I'm also thinking about what are the best characteristics that kill it, and that doesn't. I'd rather do a survey that says, hey, what are the biggest problems and challenges, and then we as a board can look at that data and make the determination what's best to address.
Yeah.
Tanya.
Nothing about this, but just to remind you, your next workshop is at 1:30
Alright.
With Jessica. So
Thank you.
I just wanted to
Okay,
remind you.
great.
Okay.
Tie it up, people.
What can we do, Dana?
The problem is if you ask for two, expecting people to participate in both of them is not going to
Or
happen.
do you want to just narrow the question down and say, hey, what are the biggest obstacles and challenges facing the superintendent today?
Yeah, but is that
Yeah,
going to
and
inform
how
you
to-
on
yeah, I
See,
think
we
selecting?
want-
I
that's
think
why
it's-
we added that,
question is
because-
good, yeah.
I think the question is good as is.
And people are going to answer both, and sometimes the answer to the second question is going to tell you the first question anyway.
That's what we thought, because we thought if you write the first thing down, then you can say, well, what are they going to do about it? And it kind of ties.
What
it.
are we? What are
Right.
the skills?
what are
That's the
skills to
piece
do
that
it?
you guys
Right.
need when you're interviewing and when you're looking at applicants.
I
Skills.
agree, I agree.
Okay,
What-
so we have.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
One more, I think this is probably the most extensive community involvement that we've arranged.
Okay, so we'll do the one-question online survey. We're going to have the advisory committee, which consists of 17 people. We are going to, and of course, I'll get from Dana their phone numbers and email addresses. The board does want semifinalists, and at the time of semifinalists, we'll request a copy of their most recent evaluation. We'll then move to finalists. Advertisement window, there's 5 venues that we typically advertise in. You can advertise in each of those 5 venues for 30 days for about $1,700. 30-day window is if you get active, people that are actively looking to be superintendent, they're going to see the ad. Some districts that have advertised for maybe 2 months, and again, that stretches out your window, which a 2-month advertisement window would put us in early July getting it. So 30 days, active job seekers, they're going to be knowing. Sitting superintendents in Florida, assistant superintendents, deputy superintendents, they will probably already know about the vacancy. So 30-day window. I'd recommend.
Is it 1,700? Because I heard her say it, and I don't know.
It's
The
total.
1,700
Total.
total, not
Yeah.
each
For
one.
30 days, yeah, total of 1750. We would recommend that you allow Bean to receive the applications. It kind of takes your HR department out of the mix for being accused of soliciting and/or holding. So those will come to me, and then I would send them to Tanya for dissemination out to you as the board members. Then I would send them to that committee for their evaluation to begin on developing their top list. And then the content of a complete application, as I said, would be the cover letter, resume, 3 letters, and a copy of the transcripts.
Yes.
What is the date that you want the new superintendent selected? And then we'll work back.
When is Dr. Pace's last day? June 30th?
I don't think we're gonna have time between now and June 30th, if you're looking for all this kind of input.
Oh, Lord of mercy.
I'm just
It's gonna be
saying.
tight. It's gonna be tight. It's gonna be in June, John, isn't
Can't you start like advertising?
Yeah,
No.
sorry.
it? You have to get the
While-
input
Well, you don't
first.
start advertising until you get your community input on
So
what they
that you know
think
what
the
you
qualities
want.
and characteristics need to be.
Oh, because you.
Because that's what we put in the ad.
I mean, I would encourage people to begin sending in their resumes. I mean, because
The problem is they focus their resume and their cover letter based on what the qualities are of the board, so.
The job, you mean the job description?
Well, it's not actually a job description as much as what the board desires. After we get all this community input, then people will, and I'll tell you, if you try to.
Like if we say turnaround schools are important, then they'll put that in their cover
Correct.
letter.
They're
I'm
gonna
the best turnaround person in the world. I turn around 10 schools, so the cover letter.
They
They're
will
gonna,
make sure.
right, they're gonna go ahead and give you a whole section
Yeah.
of their
The
resume
data
on
they
it, the
have.
data they have, they're gonna do it, because because there's the paper screen at first, before, you know.
When does school start, the
Is
school
there-
year?
August. But there is
That period of like the.
Because we can always ask Dr. Pace, I know she submitted a resignation.
Resignation.
Like, if school doesn't start till August and she's done June 30th, we're gonna ask her to extend for 30 days to give us some time.
That would be.
You know what I mean? This
yeah,
is a
that would be
possibility
up to
to
her,
take.
But we can't count on
I
that.
know.
Okay, so let me ask this. What is, I mean, is,
Or another way of looking at it, let's just
Taking-
get started right away.
well, yeah, that's where I was going. Like, take me through the process of like, why would it take us from now, mid-January till July to complete this process? Like, what is a stopgap?
Okay, it would probably take you about, with the other searches being conducted, say 3 weeks to
Okay,
do
that's
your
easy.
forums. 3 weeks for forums,
And we're starting Thursday with the forum, so.
right.
Okay.
Then we compile that information very quickly. At your next scheduled board meeting or workshop, and/or the way to expedite this some would be if you're open to special board meetings or special workshops, where we would come back and only deal with one or 2 items instead of our typical
Which means
way
you're
of.
committing to extra meetings
Right.
from what's already on your
Said,
agenda.
Like, that's the job.
Okay.
I mean,
I typically try to line up with an existing board meeting and/or workshop that we can kind of get some of this done, but if I have the flexibility to maybe put in 2 or 3 special meetings or workshops of the board, that certainly will carry us at a faster pace.
Right.
The advertisement window, so once we conclude the input, we start advertising. We run it for 30 days, then you're going to have 2 weeks that your advisory committee members have to meet and come up with their list to send forward to you.
Right.
You then will have about a week to 10 days to say, yes, we're going to keep these all as semifinalists, do the questions. It takes about 7 days. We like to give the applicants that weekend to prepare their
The
written
semifinalists.
and video responses. That comes back to you, maybe at a special meeting. Then you select the finalist. The next week, after you select finalists, then the next week is when we typically try to put in the on-site interviews, which probably, I'll work with it. If I have the flexibility to maybe call a few special meetings or workshops, or add on to the end of any you have.
I think it would be a good idea, sir, is that you write that down, that timeline, like, we're starting as soon as possible, and if it falls into, like, let's say it ends July 15th, then that's a different conversation to have with Dr. Pace, and be like, hey, look, we're trying to do everything perfectly, we want there to be a little bit of an overlap, then we can have that conversation with her. I don't want to just tell her, hey, let's have that conversation of going a little bit longer without.
And I'll do my best to get it in as,
Yeah.
The fact that you're flexible on meetings will help. And we couldn't create the timeline until we knew what you wanted for the citizens group. That takes up a chunk of time because they have to meet and they have to wait once the final applications, you will get more applications on the final day than you will
yes.
leading up to it.
Yeah.
So when that final pack of applicants drops, it could be 6 or 7 new applicants that day.
Right.
People need time to review them.
Right.
And you'll need time to review them. So those are the kinds of things that take some extra time.
And I see what you're saying, and you don't want to just look at our current board schedule and say, okay, I had that final interview meeting the day after, then I got to wait a week and a half to have the next meeting. We're flexible enough that we're willing to have a special meeting just to hurry up and expedite
I'll
that.
do the best we can.
The only other thing I was thinking to speed it up, if we didn't have semifinalists.
Right, that's true
And
too.
some boards don't have semifinalists, and I'm not sure how many applications you're gonna have, to be real honest with you, because the pool is diminished, so that if you didn't have semifinalists, you'd still get the videos, you'd get everything else. You just go ahead and make one cut instead of 2, and that would probably save 2 weeks.
So to be clear, the
Go ahead.
committee, let's go back to the example we used. The committee would come and say, here are the 9 that we believe you ought to continue to consider. They would give you that information. You'd have a few days to review it. So when you came back, instead of saying semifinalists, we're going to give them a week to respond and you a few days to look at it, we would say, who do you want to bring in for an interview? So there's 5 that the committee brings to you.
Let's say those 3 overlaps, like you said earlier, 3, 5, and 10. Maybe for the expediency at that time, I may not fight for that 4th one and just say, hey, let's just
Correct.
agree to just bring
And
in
then
the
you just
3.
have a few that, 3, 4, however many come in for an interview. We would still ask them to give you some written and video responses so that when they came for the interview, you will have already seen them, but it's not that time. So that's another option. He can look at the dates, and if it looks like it would work better without semifinalists to be closer to your deadline, he can give you kind of what both might look like.
And
I
also,
like the idea of both because we may look at it, we may argue too much in the final 3, that we may have to do a second phase, even if it doesn't overlap
well,
perfectly.
but I need to build it in then because we have to let the applicants know you must be available for on-site interviews on these dates. I mean, they've got calendars that are very busy, some of these folks, so we'll have to lock it in.
And they'll block it out on their calendar, and if you change it, then they may not be
The
available.
board is gonna have to approve this calendar anyway.
Correct.
So maybe we can come up with 2 versions, one with semis and.
And I will say this, it's just as easy to go through the 2-day on-site interview process with 5 finalists as it is with 3 or 2.
It costs a little bit more because you're bringing people in, but
You're on-site, basically, we just give the out-of-people candidates a day to get into town. Then let's say we do this on a Thursday, Friday. Thursday, you'll interview the finalists, whether it be 3 or 5, as a sitting board.
it's a long day, but you can do it.
My gut, though, tells me semi to include it, because then it's like, okay, it allows us good transparency, I see a
Right.
narrowed field.
Right. And the
I don't know how the
second-
rest of you feel.
And the second day would be one-on-one interviews with each board member and each candidate, one-on-one. Those are not open to the public.
Well, how do the rest of you feel about semifinalists versus non-semifinalists?
I mean, the semifinalists I don't know.
It does add an extra At least 10 days,
At
maybe
least
more.
10 days.
Yeah, but I also don't want to call it in. This is the most important thing I've ever done.
I mean, and that's the reason why we're
Yeah.
creating an advisory committee too, right? That's who's helping us get the semifinalists. That's taking that whole aspect out.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. What the heck would
Well,
we?
well, not really. They're narrowing it down to like, say, 9 or something like that. That's not really semifinalists. It's like another round to like sit there and say, okay, we got those. Well, I don't know. I'm speculating too much because we may only agree on 2 of them. You know what I mean? Only 2 great. So,
I will say this, we've never done a search where there wasn't some clear agreement on a handful of applicants. Because of the type of people who apply, some are gonna just rise to the top. It's gonna be pretty clear, 4, I'm gonna guess, and this is just, you guys tell me if you think I'm wrong,
Yeah.
4 or more of you will all agree on 3 or more applicants.
okay.
That's typically what will happen. There will be some others, and many times, those others are the ones who do end up getting offered the job, because what's on paper is not what you get face-to-face. So having more that maybe aren't in full agreement, I don't think is a bad thing. And we really, if we can include, we prefer to keep them in the pool longer rather than not. But my guess is you will have some clear agreement, because that's what we have seen every single time. Even on boards that were split that we thought would never reach agreement, it's almost always.
Because I like your process, like when you said, when there's like, let's say the committee agrees to, let's say, 9, and then we watch videos on each 9, we don't narrow it down at that point. From watching those videos and seeing a little bit more interaction, then I think we can come to.
So we'll build it in with semifinalists and see where the date lands.
Team, we have 6 minutes before our next board workshop, 1 and 2. Also, there's lunch. So, did we give you everything that you needed?
John, do you need anything else?
I need to get with Dana and try to come up, identify your graduation.
Because we need to work around things.
Oh,
You don't want to have anything.
Congratulations.
yeah, that makes sense. There's lunch for everybody next week over at the Community Relations Office. Yep.
Thank you. Sorry it took so long, but we got
No,
really
it's
good
super
information.
good.
It's a lot of important stuff, yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea.
I can't wait for the good
These are
information
good-
from the community, yeah.
Good input.